if I call myself Prodigy, and then like I sit at 1K forever and I don't make it happen, and I don't crack high stakes, like that will tilt me so hard. Like seeing like I've just called myself Prodigy and then like never made it happen. Like I've just like lied to myself. And so I kind of like, you know, wrote it down as sort of like a promise to myself that like this is gonna be, you know, this is gonna be correct. Like this is, you know, I'm gonna put in the effort, and like I'm gonna make this come true.
Today, we will be chatting with recently crowned cash game world champ Owen, better known as Prodigy. This is actually going to be the second time we have Owen on, and in our previous conversation, he mentioned the following.
I want to be number one. Like, I don't know if I'll make it. I hope I'll make it, but I want to be number one.
Fast forward 1.5 years later, he did just that.
We have found our cash game world champion. Congratulations to Prodigy on taking down the series, claiming the title, the glory, and the Rolex for himself.
I felt like I had a lot more to prove than the other guys, to some extent. Someone like Linus, like whether he wins or he doesn't, he's got so many accolades. In a weird way, I wanted to be like, you know, no one knows how good I am. I want to show how fucking good I am.
That episode was actually titled as well, The Next Best Poker Player, ? Fast forward 1.5 years now, can we remove the question mark?
No one comes into a reg battle just like, okay, my goal here is to lose slowly. Like, you know.
As the champion now, right, you have a lot of people looking up to you, wanting to be like you. What advice would you give to low and mid-stakes players who dream of competing in the next World Championship and maybe even win it? How can they beat you? That's basically what they want to know. Thank you guys for tuning in to what's going to be another great episode of the Mechanics of Poker podcast. Quick announcement, we have seats open for our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. If you want to work with me and Adam and have us help you make more progress in your poker career, you can apply using the link down below or go over to mechanicsofpoker.com. Without further ado, guys, enjoy this episode. There he is, cash game champ, Owen, congratulations. Great performance. You guys put it on a great show.
Yeah, I mean, good to win, but also good to put on a good show as well. You know, I'd like to think I won with some style.
I recall you actually in our last conversation, actually, you talked about how you thought the sport element of poker was often kind of underrated, and like the gamble side came out, right? And I think you recalled like Hustler Casino was a bit guilty of that, and you liked it actually way more, like the way they covered chess. Do you think Coinpoker in general, they did a good job of trying to make it a bit more like chess, where you saw high level poker and people competing against each other?
Yeah, 100%. I think this was really a spectacle for the poker purists. Yeah, and like, yeah, I just think having an appreciation of just how high level poker can be, you know, getting regs to come on stream and like show off a bit and show like just how much is going on like under the hood in some of these hands. I think, yeah, this was like, honestly, this is what I would dream of in a poker event. Like, if everything was like this, then yeah, I'd be having, yeah, this is perfect for me. Honestly, since it's ended, I've just been like, I've been playing some, especially some like heads up battles, but it's kind of been weirdly low intensity. This was like so much fun for me, just the thriller competition, playing against, you know, all the best guys.
Yeah, a little spoiler alert for the audience. In 2 weeks from now, when you're watching this, we actually release a podcast with Armin, Absolute Top Up, and he actually said the same thing. It's like after the challenge, I think all you guys, you kind of fall into this sort of black hole where it's like the normal grind is a bit boring, you know, your dopamine system is stimulated at such a high level. So I think you guys should just all meet up again and just continue play for the sake of it. What do you think?
Yeah. It's like, I say that after having had a couple weeks break, and but then if we got back into it, I'm sure it'd just be like, okay, like we should have taken a little bit more time off before hitting a grind that intense again. I think for some of the guys who were finished a bit more middle of the pack, maybe they're probably a bit more rusted, I guess, because like they didn't have that, you know, right up until the wire, like playing. But yeah, it did leave me pretty shattered. I think I barely played poker for like a week after the challenge ended. yeah, just didn't touch it, which is so weird for me. Like that probably doesn't sound like a lot to most people, but I usually take like a day or two off. And then after the challenge, I was just like, oh my God, I can barely even look at poker. I just need to collapse. And yeah.
Is the itch back?
Yeah, kinda. But like, I'm not like, I found I just wasn't playing that well. But also, I mean, I was playing heads up, so it kind of made sense for me to be rusty. I got like kind of killed by Yassam. But yeah,
Just
I
went
felt like
for
I wasn't.
revenge.
So yeah. I mean, I was kind of winding him up in the challenge, you know. I mean, all in good fun, but yeah. And then he was doing a countdown until the challenge ended. He was just like, "I'm waiting for you in 7 days, motherfucker." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And then like, yeah, and then we played, and he murdered me. He had almost 1,000 big blind stack on one table, and I was like, okay. Um, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's obviously running well, but also I could feel it myself. Like the intensity wasn't really there, which is something which I, you know, need to find to be competing at like the highest level. But yeah, I'm sure it'll come. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's just like after such a big high, there's obviously a bit of a rebound. Yeah, which I'm like, yes, I'm not trying to be too hard on myself in that respect. Yeah, it's kind of to be expected. Like one thing Yuri said was that like so often after an upswing, people will play their worst poker because you're so used to everything working that like that you feel like you don't even need to try for all the money to gravitate towards you. And like, I remember he said that to like so many people I've seen come through Gorilla over the years, like Bart too. So I'm pretty aware of the fact that like, yeah, this is gonna, you know, if I'm not feeling super motivated right now, that's just kind of a natural part of where I'm at in that cycle, and it'll come. Yeah.
I can definitely relate. I remember having at some point when I had like my best month, I believe I won like 35K or something. This was a long time ago. I was playing a 3-6, 5-10. And I was like, wow. And guess what? The next month was my worst ever month. So I can definitely relate. You just sit in a bit more relaxed. It's like, you know, I could discover, it's almost like, I want to say it's a little bit cocky, but it's like what you said, you're a bit less engaged than, you know, if you go in, yeah, with not that win on your back. For the audience, by the way, who are new to our channel, this is actually the second time we're chatting with Owen. We did a full podcast covering his complete story towards, I think it was the end of 2023. In that podcast, you clearly actually stated that you wanted to become the #1 poker player, which was also actually the motivation behind your screen name. I actually listened back to it. You said Prodigy, which was kind of a promise to yourself and kind of an act of accountability, because now there was no way out, right? You put it out there, so now you had to become the best.
Yes.
That episode was actually titled as well, "The Next Best Poker Player?" ? Fast forward 1.5 years now, can we remove the question mark?
Yeah, I remember being like tentative about that. I was just like, oh, is this too cocky? Or I mean, you were just like, no, it's fine, you know, like we're just putting the question out there. Maybe you will be, maybe you won't. And I was like, okay, let's go. But yeah, I mean, obviously now feeling like a lot better about that. I think the next best poker player definitively might be a bit a bit much. Like I still think you know, it obviously like I feel like I played amazingly throughout the challenge. But like there's obviously elements of run good over like a 40K hand sample. So I think if I were to just like, I mean, the graph looks very pretty, but if I were to just stick that up on the wall and say, yeah, I am the best, no doubts, that would probably be jumping the gun. Yeah, there's some battles to be had with like Linus and Davey first before I can lay that one down.
So how representative do you think this championship is for measuring who is currently the best? So that would mean that you're the GOAT. And on the opposite of the spectrum, we have Silama, who's then officially the worst.
Yeah. The fabled sandwich where we would go top and bottom of the leaderboard. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like it's definitely correlating quite strongly, but I think I mean I think as well like Llama was taking things like he was a bit cocky about it. I'd say this is I was I was obviously living with him during the time and like going over hands with him, and I feel like because he'd been playing so many free-handed battles with Davey and Linus, and like also Yassam would be in there and Barak as well. And he'd been playing those lineups for so long, and he's just like, oh well, this is actually a step down from those games. He just expected chips to come to him, if you know what I mean. Whereas I was more like, I had like that intensity right from the start. I feel like he gave like 100k head start, and then was suddenly like, oh no, I need to start playing. And then he ran a bit bad and was like, okay, well, all right, I'll go. He's like in Vegas. There's plenty of big live games and like much bigger than 5100. So yeah, I think I wouldn't say that like my I wouldn't say it's definitive, but I think the way I played in the challenge, I would say that I played the best over those 40k hands actually, because I played with like such intensity the whole time, and I think I was like I think to some people they weren't taking it. Yeah, they it wasn't as serious to them. I would say like Linus at one point he was like I think he dropped out when he was roughly like 15 buy-ins off the pace, which is obviously like a pretty decent lead that I had at that point. But it's also like, you look at how Kevin was taking the challenge. If Kevin was 15 buy-ins off the pace, he would just be like, okay, that means I need to play 16 hours tomorrow. And that's what he was trying to do. So you could see there was like a little like, and also Davey had scheduled some time off at the start of the challenge, so he'd missed that. So I think like there were a few of the guys who I would say, if I was trying to rank myself one, I would say I'd need to definitively say I'm better than like, Llama, Davey, Linus. I think those are like the three names that I would have to. And I think in all of those cases, it's a bit blurry around the edges, but I think everyone else I'm comfortable saying that there's like a pretty decent gap. I mean, like maybe we'd stick like Kevin on the edges. But yeah, I'd say that top five, at least in my mind, is quite separated from everyone else. And then there's like a bit of a like there's a tier below of like people who are still like very good players, but I wouldn't I wouldn't be uncomfortable saying that we're like, this group is clearly stronger.
Often like from the outside looking in, and also in my experience, like I haven't battled any high stakes in the recent years, but before that I was very active doing that as well. And from the outside looking in, and people would always say, why do you battle? Edges are small, everyone is basically GTO, right? But I remember also in the last podcast you pointed out that we have to always remember the fact that people are human. Even like I commentated on quite a lot of matches also with Yuri actually, and there were a couple of things where we sometimes put the people a bit too much on a pedestal, and we have to kind of say, listen, even these guys are humans, they will also be sensitive to making mistakes, and certain areas are just easier to screw up than others. But like commonly, every time when I watched the streams and the commentating, everyone would say the win rates are so close. But like an honest opinion, like from my experience, people were saying that back in the days, and I was like, no. There's a couple of guys winning all the money, and a couple of guys losing a lot of money, right? How close do you feel like it is? You already kind of pointed out like sort of top 5. What are we talking about in win rates? Like I think you ended up with 10 BB 100. Do you think this is a representative
I ended up
win
with
rate?
14. Don't undersell
14 even.
Well, I mean, you can just look at Davies' graph realistically, and Davies had like, I think 7 to 9 BB reg battling for years. And like, obviously there are some fish in there, it's not the championship where it's essentially just like all regs. But, like Davies been winning at that kind of rate in the toughest games. Like the guy doesn't game select. I mean, he was recently on a podcast, and someone, I was very happy that they translated a bunch of it for me. And one of the things he said was he just prioritizes showing up and just playing his best, and then whatever the game is, the game is. And like you can definitely, you can see that in the games he ends up in, and he like, he's been crushing at like an insane win rate for so long. Like, obviously some of the games, like he does play down to 5K and sometimes down to 2K, so some of the games might be easier than the challenge. But yeah, I think when people say that you can only ever really hit a 2BB win rate in a red battle, that's them sort of telling on themselves, because it's them saying that they don't understand how deep poker goes. That you can, that if you think about what a 2BB win rate is, that's like, so imagine you guys are just chopping GTO, and then there's 120 big blind pot every 1,000 hands where you make a super high confidence decision in what is supposed to be a 0 EV spot. It's like every 1,000 hands you find 120, and then you actually think about what realistically happens, and it's like you have like these 200 big blind pots which are going in all the time because everyone's super aggressive. And sure, there'll be a bunch of them where you just have to play kind of standardly and the guy doesn't give anything away. But if you just find, you don't need to find one of those often to add 5BB to your win rate. Which is what I think people don't appreciate, because like they're so used to, they're so used to this idea of like, I will just play good poker and the other person will like fall apart. And it's like, okay, maybe we need to, set some challenges for them and see where they trip up and be willing to go out on a limb. And then obviously like edges get even higher when people are playing like that, because if you're willing to get really out of line, then it also means like the counter exploit is always even bigger than the exploit. Like if you're gonna range call someone for a stack, then it gets really brutal for you if the person like 1 under bluffs and then 2 starts going like even thinner, and then suddenly like your range call is like losing tons of money. And then you think about, you get a bunch of players in who are prepared to make those decisions all the time, and like obviously not all of them are going to go your way, but it adds up, and like the edges can get quite big. Like someone wants to play a really defensive play style, there's some guys in there like that who I was just like, well, the maximum amount of edge you can push against these guys is just gonna be like not that big, but they're also not causing anyone any problems. And I think most people came in with the attitude that they were gonna like go out there and get their EV. And like they're aware that makes them vulnerable to counter punches, but that's why the like edges can actually get somewhere. No one comes into a reg battle just like, okay, my goal here is to lose slowly, like so that there is, I think there's plenty of room, and everyone kind of says it's like a 2BB cap, but like even if we say like Davy's an outlier and has run well his whole career, or like Davy's just Davy and like no one can aim to be that, it's like clearly more than that. Like I don't know exactly where to draw the line, but I think saying that someone can beat a reg battle for 5BB, it would not be controversial to me at all.
I think it's very important to have like your perspective, because I definitely share this opinion. But there's people on 500NL that are saying that you cannot win in reg battles. So that is why.
Oh my god, the
right?
Saulo tweet, man, the Saulo tweet, where he's just like, we put a 500 NL reg in these 20k NL battles and they would lose it like 3BB max, and then we were just like, wow, where is this 500 NL reg that we can spot 3BB to come punt to us? Like, please, like, I'm sorry to 500 NL regs. You're probably in like the top 0.something% of poker players everywhere, but there's just such a, there's just a massive difference. And like, we took all the 10k regs in the world, and there's still like, there's still like edges between people. Like some people, you could just tell that they were getting hunted by other regs as well. Like you could see that dynamic happens. Like at the start, everyone's just thinking like, oh, it's a reg battle, I just take any tables. But you could see as it was going on, there were certain people who were only playing when someone else was there. And it's like, like it's not, some people, when regs start looking at other regs like they're fish, and that's kind of, that's like that hunter's mentality.
But that is the thing, right? When people say you have poor games, like I remember throughout my career, I did a lot of battling, and I was often called out for bad game selection. But I actually thought I had very good game selection in terms of I was hammering. I was very selective with which racks and in which positions and in which time of the day even I would sit against someone, right? There was a whole strategy around that. In terms for you, like game selection wise, did you have like, for example, you pointed out Goats, Linus, Davy, I would say the two most established names, right? And they had Lama in there, Jasa and Barak. Were you, I mean, I remember, I think you were in the US, correct? Was it maybe also a conscious decision in terms of time zone wise?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was mostly just playing when I felt sharp because, but yeah, which was just the priority to me. Like, I felt like when I was playing sharp, I was playing so well that, you know, that it was just, it didn't matter the table lineup was how I felt. It's like, sure, the win rate on some tables will be lower than others, but it's not like a highest win rate challenge. It's a most dollars challenge. So I was like, okay, if I'm feeling good, I'll just like get up and play whatever's there. So yeah, I wasn't really like thinking too much about that. I mean, it kind of came in more at the end of sessions. Like if I'd been playing for like 6 hours and the tables weren't that good, then I was more likely to just call it a day. But yeah, if we're playing like, you know, if the tables are kind of softer, like Linus has gone to bed, Kevin is somehow not at the tables by some miracle, and yeah, like it's just doesn't have those guys who are like fighting quite so hard. Then you know maybe I play an extra hour or two, but I wasn't really thinking about game selection beyond that. In fact, we had like someone was looking for some side bets, not someone who's playing in the challenge, but they had some people they wanted to bet on, and we were talking about how to do it, and one of the things they wanted to do was they wanted to do win rate props. But I was like, okay, I don't want to do a win rate prop because that will mean you kind of have to game select a bit, you know? Like, if I'm doing my win rate against another reg and that other reg has like 5 BB win rate, it means if I play a 2 BB table, I'm bleeding money on the prop bet. And I was like, I don't want to have to do that. I just want to sharpen play. So yeah, we tried working out some things, but like nothing really came of it in the end. But yeah, just because what wasn't something I wanted. I didn't want to have that like extra layer of thinking about it. It was already stressful enough just in the final few days working out like, okay, how much volume do I have to play? Like me and Rig literally within $500 of each other at one point with like 5 days to go. I was just like, oh, what, you know, what's the plan here? All these weird like ICM considerations, which aren't supposed to be a thing when you play cash. I was like, yeah, I was glad I didn't have any other stuff to think about. Although that being said, I could have taken the win rate prop versus anyone, and it would have been quite nice. So
yeah, I was gonna say, lucky him.
Yeah, it's good in foresight. In hindsight, I wish I just YOLO'd it.
Speaking about game selection, did you notice that, especially towards the end of the challenge, when you were clearly, you know, there were a couple guys that were clearly dominating the field, and whether that was like a true win rate or just the fact that they were, you know, they were on a high, they were playing well. Did you notice that some guys started to give you less action? Was it harder to get action?
Yeah, well, it was a bit harder to get action towards the end. Like not impossible by any means, but I think, well, it's hard to say whether it was like a me specifically thing or it was just like the challenge was out of reach for a lot of people at that point. When me and Rigged have like, other than Kevin, everyone was saying like 30 binds behind, and you can see why people are like, okay, you know, we'll play a little bit, but they're not trying to grind like super heavy volume at that point. And yeah, it just kind of makes sense. You can't really hold that against people. So yeah, I think it was probably a little bit of both. But yeah, there was still like plenty of games, I'd say. I mean, Kevin was still playing round the clock right down to the wire. And like Barak had set himself a mission to dig himself out of the hole he was in. So yeah, there was still games going down to the wire.
Yeah, and then I saw Enlight and Ignacio Moron also hopping in.
Zaz making
extra action.
Zaz couldn't play the first month. But then yeah, he came back and yeah, it was kind of fun. Like Zaz was a lot of fun at the tables as well. Like he'll like free bet you with A3 suited on the show table and then go Samba when he gets through. Like yeah.
Yeah, I definitely saw some entertainment. I remember actually a hand where I don't know exactly what happened, but I think it was a fake misclick. Where I think Kevin limped the small blind and then he made it 3K instead of 3 big blinds or something like that. And then Kevin jammed sixes and he had ace king, and then Kevin said, haha, nice trick. So there were a bunch of stuff going on like that, which was actually quite funny. We actually are already quite deep into the championship, but I actually wanted to start the conversation of quickly kind of bridging the gap between when we last spoke and now. That's been like, what have you been up to in like since the last time we spoke? So that's like 12 to 15 months leading up to the challenge. Any noticeable improvements or changes you've made in your approach to playing poker compared to when we last spoke in 2023?
Yeah, I mean a lot of things like technically been refined since then. Yeah, I think as well, like I sort of, well, quite recently at least, I got to a level of fluency where I swore off solvers for a bit. Just because I felt like they were getting in my way of making the play, which was making the most money. Just because I was almost too aware of just like, oh, okay, in this spot we're supposed to, like, this is how it's supposed to play. And I was like going through the motions of that too much rather than actually thinking about, you know, what this line means when a human does it, rather than what it means when a solver does it. Yeah, I mean, I've just been feeling so much more confident recently. I've been playing a lot of heads up as well in that time, which was something which I think really helped me with going into the challenge. Because a lot of heads up mindset is about like killing the exact guy across from you, and like you're not just playing your game and just hoping they're not reacting to it, and hoping that, you know, everything you're doing at the start will work like 5,000 hands later. You're constantly trying to be sharp and thinking about thinking about exactly what they're showing you they know about your game, and also what they're giving away about theirs. And yeah, I had like a lot of experience of that over the past year or so, because I've been just obsessed with heads up. Whenever I could get action, I would play. Yeah, I went into the challenge kind of thinking about it like that. Where I was like trying to think of it more as like 20 1v1s. I mean, I know there's like 45 odd players, but like a lot of people who dropped out. And I sort of had this different approach where I was trying to play like a very tailored game plan to everyone. Like I remember talking to Riggs about the challenge afterwards, and I was just like, I really hope that there are people having very strong disagreements about what my tendencies and leaks are after the challenge, because I assume like my game's getting discussed, you know, at least somewhat. I was like, I really hope there are guys who just being like, oh, it's a massive fucking station, and then someone else is just like, what do you mean? Like, this guy never calls rivers. And it's like, yeah, I hope that there's like a bit of a, you know, maybe a bit more nuance than that to it, but yeah, I really wanted to play against the individuals, because I think that was what suited me, and it's like quite a small pool, especially like a lot of the action was like 3 or 4 handed. I think you're playing against the same guys across every table, so having, you know, just like bringing up my notes, refreshing it before like sitting down and just being like, okay, this is how I think I'm generating edge against this guy, you know, compared to against this guy, like, and also like the opposite. These are the spots where the guy is playing very well. Like, don't worry too much. This guy's just got a very accurate, good triple barrel. Like, you're just gonna have, you know, just call down properly. Like, don't don't waste too much mental energy or stuff like that. Yeah, and I think that was an element that probably the 6max guys weren't as ready for. Because yeah, they probably hadn't done something like you don't really hear about 3-handed challenges, right? Like, sometimes you get it with like the Linus, Davey, Lama, Yassam, Barak, or you know, these guys, they're playing in their sort of own pool. But I think for a lot of the guys, they're used to they're used to fading into the background a bit, and for everyone else being like just another reg at the table who you know kind of whether they're like a red liner or a blue liner or whatever, but you don't have this like very specific read on how they're gonna try and take your chips and like how they're gonna leave theirs exposed. But yeah, I think just getting more like being like way more into that mindset. Yeah, just like not trying to, not trying to have like a default box of tricks or anything where I'm too reliant on like certain ways to get things, but more trying to be like a chameleon. Which is one of the things which I think sets the top guys apart. Like it's not universally true, but I think like above a certain level, so the way that a lot of guys have got there is being prepared to win, like whatever that way is. Like, just on a simple level, they can blue line or they can red line depending on like who their opponent and what they're giving. But yeah, like lots of other things, like not being too married to one play style. And then I think like, yeah, one of the things which marks people out as a tier below that to me is they have a trick that they like running, and like it might be a really good trick, but they're not critical about whether this is the right guy to run it on. So it might be good against 80% of the field, but then there's a 20% where this is like this is just burning money. And so like on average, it's making them EV having this like, having this thing they like to do, whatever it is, whether it's a macro game plan or some like weird tech. But if you're not critical about who this is good against, then it's kind of just like it's like it's gaining you EV, but it's like borderline elite, because if someone works it out, then suddenly this starts bleeding so much. Which I guess comes back to what I was saying about like edge and reg vowels. Yeah, and there's guys who are like, yeah, I mean, especially with the show tables as well. You could tell who the guys were who were paying a lot of attention, and like the meta was evolving really fast against them.
Do you maybe have like an example of how players would use show tables? I remember actually in our last conversation, you mentioned something about streaming and showing your whole country. I cannot do that because these top guys, they do a lot with the information, and then suddenly we have show tables where they get all the information. So yeah, I'm very curious how that element played into your decision making, and also in terms of, you mentioned that you saw some players use that information properly and others maybe sort of ignoring it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy who used it the best was Munez. Like, I swear, so many bluffs which I used to be so sure would get through against Munez stopped getting through against him. He was like, I mean, I wouldn't say he was necessarily range calling me, but like, yeah, there were a lot of spots where I was just so used to Munez tank folding to me, and yeah, I think he realized that he couldn't get away with that. And then he was making some catches in spots that he definitely wasn't before the challenge, and I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, like Munez's default is to play on the tighter side, but yeah, it's what I'm saying, like being able to play against type and be a bit of a chameleon, like even if what he wants to do is to try and get away from spots, and like that's how he's going to generate edge by not paying people off. He realized quite early on in the challenge where he was like, okay, I'm gonna have to, like, I can't let this guy run me over, because I was just like ripping 4x pot into him like every opportunity. He got like, a few days in, and then I feel like, I mean, I haven't checked this, but if I had to see like my dollars in, dollars out, I would imagine Munez was actually up quite a bit, despite me upswinging super hard, because I thought I was just like, oh, like he made his hero call and then he'll go back to being tight. And I kept trying to bully him and he just kept calling. I was like, oh, what the fuck is this? Why is Munez stationing me? Yeah. Yeah. And then we kind of, obviously we get a bit back towards like more of an equilibrium after a while. Yeah, when I was just like, okay, like, but yeah, he still owned me like right at the end of the challenge. There was a spot where I like just tried to bully him super hard, and then he just like, yeah, he just flicks in the call with probably what was entire range. So yeah, he was definitely one that stood out to me as using that. yeah, I don't think everyone was. I don't think everyone realized, like, you know, there's a lot of info to be had here, and I think like some people were being very casual about it.
I guess it's also kind of shows more their mentality, right? Where they're a bit more focused on maybe just trying to
Yeah,
win with playing an overall better game plan and keeping the adjustments to a minimum. Something that I actually personally experienced and really liked about your approach as well. I had a very similar approach. Every battle that I would go in, I would have like 5 ways that, you know, if he would come to me. And I feel like especially in a chance like this, and especially if results maybe are not really going your way, but you can see that the plan that you set out, right? You identified, let's say you identified 5 weaknesses, and you see in game that indeed your these weaknesses are working. Then regardless of the results, you can see, okay, this EV is flowing to me. And then you gave a good example of you had a plan versus Munez, jam 4 times pot and expect him to fold 95% of the time. And then suddenly he's calling, he's like, my plan here
yeah.
needs some adjusting, right? But in a lot of areas, I'm sure you felt pretty confident that, you know, with the preparation you did going in and actually seeing like, oh, this was my plan and it's working because they're doing the things that I predicted they would do and my plan is working for them. Does that give you like a lot of confidence regardless of if the results go your way or not? Maybe not only in the challenge, but maybe also in these heads-up battles that you've been playing over the last year?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, it's really good to have some things to fall back on, and just know that, like, yeah, even because at times, so like I really like to listen to my instincts, and if I just have a feeling about a spot, I like to just go with it, which is actually something which I've got much better at since like meeting and working with Llama, because he's like, you know, he's a very instinctual player, and I was watching him play, and a lot of what he does is just he kind of knows what's reasonable, and then he'll just get a feeling to, like, go after something. And so, like, I try to do that, but sometimes, like, your instincts are kind of misfiring, and you have a session where, like, confidence is a bit low for whatever reason, and it's nice to be able to fall back on a game plan and know that, like, okay, if I just sit there and play my theory defensive game, then there's not, like, I'm not bleeding too much, and then I have, like, these specific areas where I think I'm gonna be pushing enough edge that it's fine. And then if I want to go for stuff other than that, I can, but there's no pressure to. But which is like a real, like, that's the ideal place for me to be, where, like, all of the more extreme exploits are very, very optional because I have this other game plan which I have confidence in. And then you can take the big win rate swings when you're feeling much more, when you're feeling better about them. Like, there are some calls where it's like, or like bluffs or whatever, which I'm only gonna make if I'm like that they're out of line enough that I'm only making them when I'm, like, high confidence, and then, like, there's there's like the lower level adjustments where, you've confirmed them, you spent your time off table, like, you're mostly only taking them with reasonable hands, which it's like I can, I don't need to be feeling particularly, like, good on that any given day to run that stuff. And I think that is, like, the basis of the win rate. I think that the highlight reel plays, like, are the ones, the ones where people end up on 2+2, or there's a YouTube video or whatever, are like they're like the cherry on top of your win rate. But, like, there's a lot of, like, baseline win rate in just playing well and, like, hitting the same key notes with consistency.
Yeah, like every time maneuvering your hands in the notes where, your opponent's going to screw up without him knowing it, right? So they're kind of bleeding. And then I guess that also made it easier for you because, like, a lot of the guys, they indeed hopped on, like, the Coinpoker YouTube channel, and, they were there reviewing hands, talking about strategy at a very high level. I think this was a great time for people who are interested in cash games because they could hear kind of the best of the best discussing. But what you're saying is, yeah, they usually discuss, like, this big pots, and it's quite easy to be open in that because, like, my real money was made in, like, different areas, right? My game plan was tailored in a way, and that's not something that I'm sharing, obviously, in these conversations. I remember actually also in our previous conversation, you just came back from your heads-up battle against Doc Polk, and in there you also mentioned that you had a spreadsheet on your laptop tracking every single mistake you expected him to make. This process seemed very similar. Maybe you could give an insight in how a preparation or what type of tendencies that you look for in opponents, without obviously going in specifics. You don't have to share obviously specific read, but what are kind of tendencies that people can look for in opponents to form or to like gather like 5 of these, let's say, weaknesses that they can take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got like I've actually got a lot less systematic about it now. I think my notes used to be very much like I'd have like a spreadsheet of someone's frequency by node or something. I mean, obviously, like versus Doug, I had to infer it from showdowns, but I used to do all of that stuff, and then I sort of realized more so that like I much prefer just getting like a feel for certain like puzzle pieces. Just being like, okay, well, this guy, in this specific line when this happened, I kind of felt like I was being fucked with, but I'm generally a suspicious guy. So I was like, okay, I don't have the hand, I'll fold. But just like making a note that it's like, okay, yeah, I felt like he was up to something here. And also trying to make a hand like less specific and more down to a bunch of vibes. Like, so say, you could say like, saying like, okay, I was capped here, and the guy like check raised me huge on the river, and like I felt like he might have been going after me, but also it just is kind of the size. And then like I just like note that down, and then the next time I get to a session, I'd just be like, just like read over a few, like there'll be like the core notes which I know to be true, and then like a few things where I was to say, okay, this is what I thought might have some basis to it. And then like getting to another session, it's like, okay, right, he's gone for that spot like a few more times, so we're gonna have to like either get a bit sticky to it or like prepare for it in some other way. And so yeah, and just knowing like how does someone like to come after you. Like yeah, some guys I would just be like, oh, you'd be sitting there like scared to bet a draw anywhere because they do so much raising. Yeah, and then it's like, okay, like are they am I getting raised? Like am I just do I just feel like I'm getting run over because it's like one session and sometimes someone hits that, or like am I getting the same feeling over multiple sessions to the point where I have confidence in it? And also, yeah, the problem with using stats in like a 6max scenario is that I want to know how they're playing against me, right? If I even now, if I look at Munez's stats, it will say that he's just like he's significantly overfolding to river bets, right? Sorry, Munez, your leaks are out. But like if I think about what he was doing against me specifically, yeah, I was like, okay, well, I think that one's kind of out the window. That's one which I can't be reliant on. And so yeah, I think it's just like a lot of me like noting down like random feelings I had, and then seeing like the next session I come back to, do I get that same impression, or was it just because it's so easy to feel like someone's either running you over or someone's like a complete punching bag on like a one session basis. And then if you actually think about what you're doing, it's like you're taking 1,000 hand sample and trying to extrapolate way too much from it. But if that happens like a few sessions in a row, it's like, okay, yeah, like this guy's really going to war with me here, and like we need to be ready for it. Like, yeah.
In terms of going in and looking at your own game and your own kind of strengths and weaknesses, what were like, because obviously you focus a lot on your opponents. I mean, I would estimate that a lot of the guys, they did something similar to you leading up to the challenge. They're like, oh, this Owen guy is gonna compete. Okay, well, let's take a look at how he, on average approach poker. Were there like certain, because that's then another element of warfare, let's put it this way, that you can look at, okay, these are my weaknesses, or these are potential holes that people would think that I have in my game. What are like signs that they're going after me? You done some work on that as well, kind of reflecting on your own game. Okay, where can I expect guys to come after me? And be prepared for it?
Yeah. No, I definitely like. I know the places where it's like, okay, these are the places where I would go after myself. And then just being aware of what it will look like if someone has noticed that. Because like it's kind of fine to have like, I don't know, some like macro leak or something as part of your game, especially if it's, if you want to adjust in some way, like if you want to be stronger in one area, then you're going to be weaker in another. Like you still get dealt the same hands, right? So like if you have those things going on, like it's not the end of the world, but it comes back to what I was saying, like about how if the things you're doing are good against 80% of the pool and they're not good against 20, you need to find the 20 it's not good against and flip the script on them.
Kind of what Munez did on you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Munez knows that people are gonna try to run him over, and then he was like, he's like, he was able to just like flip it around and make me look silly a few times.
Yeah, it's really funny, like especially over the last few years, analyzing people's stats and data, and basically just drawing a conclusion of, oh, these are your stats, this is your game, you're bad or good. And there's definitely outliers out there, especially in the high stakes, where if you just look at their game, just roughly just the numbers, you would say, I would have expected, this guy with this success to look a little bit more GTO or a little bit more fierce in their overall game plan. But then actually that's also a sign. It's like, they're probably doing something very well.
Yeah. I mean, this is the classic Barack thing. I've heard this so many times.
Not only, right?
Well, yeah. They're just like Barack has not only, his stats are so miles off of what they should be, and the guy's the biggest online winner of the past few years. It's like what the fuck is going on there?
What's the secret?
Yeah, I think he would be. I think he'd be very, very frustrated if I gave away any of his secret sauce. I'm fine to give away mine, but no, Barack definitely has some stuff going on. I've learned a lot from Barack. But yeah, he's gonna he's gonna get you, and it's not because he's gonna be more accurate.
There's more than meets the eye.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think like I feel like Barack is probably the high stakes reg who gets most accused of being a sunrunner, because his stats are like the most visibly out of line. But then that's as much as I can give away is that there's more going on than people initially realize.
No, I mean, and it's similar. Obviously, it's not as extreme, but it's similar with, for example, Munez. And actually, it's funny to point out, I actually been guilty of that. I think it was like 2 years ago. And I was like, there's something wrong. But I realized, like, probably I'm missing something here, right? that's kind of the humbleness that you need, I think, in this kind of scenarios. What you mentioned about being aware of your weaknesses. How do you not become paranoid, especially with show tables of like, oh, they're going after me, I remember actually in the last conversation you pointed out there was actually a leak of you when you played against tougher opponents. Like, oh, you felt like you have to kind of over adjust or show off, becoming maybe a little bit too fancy. How do you not become paranoid, especially with like the show element and with the level of competition?
I think I decided really early on that I was just gonna make the highest dollar EV play on the show tables, and then if people adjust to the info, they adjust to the info, and I will notice that they've adjusted. I was just like, I will have the confidence that if people are gonna change something up, I'm gonna see it. And I was playing mostly show tables the entire time, so I was like, well, like probably about a third of my volume was on the non-show tables. So like if they want to adjust explicitly on those ones and then just keep leaking the same way on the show ones, that's fine. Like I'll just take the money. And then I think also like having the confidence in the fact that like that I wasn't stuck with any of these. If someone showed they had the adjustment, I wasn't like married to any of the shit I was doing. I was like happy to go ditch it. I mean it's kind of like being aware that I could beat people in a bunch of different ways, made me not worried about giving away one way. Because I was like, if the guy was good enough to not leak and play perfect GTO, like like no one is that good. Like if they patch up this one wound, like something's gonna open elsewhere for me to go after, and it's just up to me to notice it and like stay ahead of the meta. And yeah, I think also like, you know, there were a lot of people that just weren't paying enough attention. Like some people were, some people weren't, but like there were definitely spots where by the end of the challenge I was kind of surprised that it was still working the same way it did at the start. And I was like, wow, people are still folding here. It was like, yep, they are. So then I was just like, okay, well, I guess I don't need to change anything up against all of these guys who have had like this mountain of showdowns to go through. And like, I mean, it's like, you know, even if they're not intending to like crush me, if they're like, oh, there's some weaker reg I want to go after, it's still, I was so much of the volume that they should have, you know, it's like they should have at least picked up on some things I was doing. But yeah, I was still getting away with a lot. And then like the guys who were showing the answers, I was like, okay, fine, I just don't run this on him specifically. Or like, you know, you can just play like closer to theory as well. Because it takes a while to know exactly whether the guy's like hard over adjusted the other way. You know, like if you triple barrel and then you see someone hero call something, it's really hard for you to say like, okay, was this specific to this spot? Was this like specific to this session or whatever? So yeah, I think like just having the confidence that I could play a close enough to balance game plan, that, you know, if someone wanted to make some extreme adjustment, I could also make the extreme adjustment wrong. I remember, I can't remember the hand, but I just remember the feeling of like, there was a spot where someone like full on like mega torch range called me. Like they called like a -20 BB catcher somewhere, and I was bluffing. But I just remember sitting there just being like, I'm not playing the spot badly enough for this to be a good call. Like, I was just like, yeah, I just had that confidence where I was like, well, I mean, I might be out of line, but this call is still losing money. Like, you know, feel free.
Yeah, that's the thing. Also, like I've commentated a bunch of times, and then I remember Johan asking questions like, "Is this GTO or is this?" And then it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, we don't know which frequency it shows up with this hand, right? So that's always the problem. Like, obviously, if someone makes a call that we're like, okay, this is clearly not a call. He's doing this for some sort of reason. You know, it's also kind of, you know, if you're gonna do this, and especially if you call a little bit fast, it kind of reviews that, hey, you know, he's onto you. So usually what you will see, this is like usually not too common. Usually it's just like, yeah, this is a frequency hand and we don't know which frequency they're doing it with. So yeah, good luck finding out. Especially obviously in the commentating shoes. Obviously you're way more engaged and you're following way more what was going on. Adam, in terms of paranoia, I feel like this is a thing that players struggle with a lot, right? They get paranoid. I hear this a lot in coaching, especially guys who are a bit more, who take the game a little bit more personal, and they say like, oh yeah, but he's adjusted now, I'm gonna readjust, and they go throughout this whole leveling war. Which, you know, if we're playing at the level of Owen and it's indeed them versus them, I can definitely see it. But at mid stakes, you know, where the pools are just way bigger, I think it's more often a mistake than something that's actually, you know, contributing a lot to the win rate. What triggers people to be paranoid, and how can they fix it?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of the uncertainty. You're trying to play attack whilst also playing defense, and you're assuming that you're going to come out on top, but you're also feeling quite vulnerable. So there's no safety net. Like GTO's like, oh, I can play this solids, they can't get me. Whereas you're really going out there going, I'm going to try and get you. You might get me. And there's that like kind of back and forth. And I think some people don't like that uneasiness, that kind of uncertainty around who's got the edge, who's not. And yeah, the less confidence you have in your kind of problem solving and ability to stay on top of the meta, like Owen said, the more paranoid you're going to be. Because like, if I do this, they can exploit me back. So yeah, I think some players obviously struggle a lot and they like to go for a more GTO framework. I'm guessing most guys in the challenge don't fit that bill, and they always have confidence in themselves to be able to outmaneuver their opponents, and they love that. They love the kind of back and forth. I know Owen comes from a chess background, so you've already got used to that kind of dynamic of trying to make attacking plays whilst also not keeping yourself open. So yeah, I think it's a thing players need to work through, but it's just making yourself more vulnerable, but also increasing confidence, because you might get exploited if you're not playing the game well. Yes, yeah, from a mindset perspective, I really want to dive into the challenge and yeah, get some kind of takeaways from you. So going into the challenge, what were your expectations? I know you're a confident guy. Were you going for the crown?
Yeah. I mean, I was saying right from the start that I wanted to win it. Obviously, at the start I was like, okay, I can play as well as I like, but if I get doom switch or I'm bad, then it's out of my control. So, I was kind of prepared for that. Also, I like start the challenge just breaking even for like quite a while. Well, I say quite a while, like 5-6 days, but it's quite a lot of hands. And so, but yeah, I still remember like even during those days, I remember thinking to myself like, I was like so sure I was outplaying people, and then I was like I'm outplaying people, and then someone just gets like I just get cooler twice or whatever, and then like it all falls apart. But I was just sitting there just like like I just need these coolers to flip, and then like you know I was like, well, the coolers are keeping me in check, but like once they go around, I mean obviously like a lot of people can feel like this, like you can just feel like when it's like run bad when it doesn't go my way and all steal when it does. But yeah, I had that really distinct impression, and then I had like one day where it just felt like I kept making hands, or like all the bluff catches were going right as well, and I won like 12 binds in a day. And I was like, yeah, this is what I was looking for, because it felt like I was like treading water, but like treading water by not making like not making very many hands. I was just like, I don't know, I felt like I was just outmaneuvering people. Um, yeah, I mean, like obviously it's hard to be like it's hard to be objective about these things, but like from my subjective experience, I was feeling really confident the whole like the whole way, and then like yeah, that was at the start before I'd even like really got off to any particular lead. And then yeah, there was a point where I started like picking up some momentum, and it just felt like I remember top up was out in the lead, and I just felt like, okay, it's not if I run top up down, it's when. Which is like it's kind of a delusional thing to say in like a super high variance environment. Like you see what happens to some people, but like that's just how I was feeling throughout. I think I had like one or like 2 sessions throughout the challenge which I wasn't happy with, where I was just like, I was like, okay, like I didn't really come to crush people in these sessions. I just sort of played like okay-ish, but like even then I didn't really torch it off. But yeah, like most of the other ones, I felt like I went into them like feeling really confident, and then I came out of it really happy how I played. I mean, you get like this positive feedback loop, right? You're you're going to bed satisfied with how you played every day, and then you can like you can wake up the next day with like a good mindset ready to go. This is also like not trying to push myself super hard. I just wanted to stay in that A game sort of like mindset throughout the whole thing, and like not burn myself out. So yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, confidence was just running high throughout. There were like there were moments towards the end where I was just like gets a bit nervy with like me and Rigged at the top, but yeah, I was still like the thing which was making me more nervous was just like not that I would actually play any bad poker. I was so sure that if I sat at the tables, I was gonna play well. But I was like what I was what I was worried about was making the wrong decision about how much to play, because there was a point where I hit like I think I hit like 520, and then I dropped back down to like 470. Actually, no. I think I hit 500 and dropped down to 450, and like Rigged was at like 480 or something. I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the exact, but it was something like that where like if I'd quit the session at peak, I would have been ahead, and instead I was like 3 binds down, and like yeah, the only thing which was worrying me was that I would make a wrong decision about about like yeah these kind of like soft skills which you weren't trained for. I felt like yeah immense confidence honestly in everything that I'd prepped. It's just yeah this weird dynamic at the end where it's just like yeah, you might play really well at a very high win rate and just like get coolered and lose stacks, and then like yeah, and then I'll just lose the challenge. But I was like, well, that's like I made the decision to myself that if I lost, I didn't want it to be because I played to not lose and then was too timid. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go out and like I'm just gonna try to win this thing, and then if that doesn't work, it doesn't work. But yeah, I was just like, fuck like being too worried about this and playing on the conservative side. I'm just gonna play and like try and crush people. And I think like Rigged had the same outlook. We even talked about like, it was just like let's just guarantee some hands on the last day. I think this is supposed to be a fight, like worrying about all this stuff with like exactly how much volume am I supposed to put in when I'm like this many dollars ahead was not what we wanted it to be. And yeah, I think and so that was the only thing which just bugged me. Honestly, everything else I felt like really good about throughout.
What was giving you so much confidence throughout the challenge? I think you mentioned 3 days you weren't overly happy, but the rest of this like 6-week challenge you felt great. What do you feel like allowed you to have confidence you had an edge in almost any lineup you were in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly just like seeing the places where I was deviating consistently work. I think also like the show tables are quite like nice for staying in like a very chill place, because if someone pulls a bluff you weren't expecting, you can be like, okay, yeah, this guy's capable of this, I didn't realize, instead of just sitting there in doubt for all this time. I think also like generally I'm quite a confident guy, and then when I'm running well, like I'm not the type to get super anxious about it. It's just be like, oh, when's the downswing coming? I was more just like, okay, well, everything under my control, I feel like I'm handling really well, and then I'm also running well, and like if that goes together, like there's nothing to worry about. I was like, well, if I suddenly start running badly, that'll suck, but that's not like. Yeah, it's just like every day I was just thinking about hands, and I was like, well, even the hands which I'm not happy with, I'm not that unhappy with. It's like a small thing where like, I like flick in some hand which I probably shouldn't have or something, or like, I miss some call where it's just like, oh, actually, I probably knew like, I had just enough info that I could have actually called this instead of just like RNGing or whatever. But like I wasn't really I felt like I wasn't really making like big mistakes which would actually cause me to question myself, I was playing like there were some things which are mistakes in hindsight, but given the info I had at the time, I was pretty happy with them.
Big shout out to our sponsors. First off, Coinpoker. Coinpoker is one of the fastest growing poker rooms in the world right now. In a world where sites seems to care less and less about their players, Coinpoker is showing good promise, listening to the community, and provide a safe and sustainable playing environment going forward. Join the action, get 33% rakeback and 150% deposit bonus using code TMOP, or register using the link in the description down below. Next up, GTO Wizard. If you are a frequent listener of this podcast, you know that 90% of our guests use solvers to get ahead in the game, and GTO Wizard is by far the best and most accessible tool if you want to use GTO to get ahead as well.
We are proud to announce a technological breakthrough. Introducing GTO Wizard AI. This powerful technology can solve any custom poker spot in seconds to high accuracy. Unlike pre-solved solutions, this allows you to edit the solving parameters. That means you can modify the ranges, change the stack and pot sizes, customize the betting tree, and automatically simplify and optimize your bet sizes. Brace yourself. The meta is about to change.
So sign up to GTO Wizard using the link down below, gtowizard.com/mechanics. Get 10% off your first month and join the weekly coaching webinars, of which one every month is with me. Looking forward on educating you guys over there. But without further ado, let's continue chatting with Owen.
You shared with us on the first podcast one of your favorite quotes from a chess grandmaster, Mikhail Tal. You must lead your opponent into a dark forest where the path leading out is only wide enough for one. Do you feel like you led people into a dark forest throughout?
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like I'm the kind of guy who's gonna pose some like complex questions of people and just be like, do you know how to deal with this? And it's like if they know the answer, it's it's fine. This can stay a low frequency play, but if you don't, like I'm gonna like I'm gonna keep I'm gonna teach you the answer by like hitting you with it until you learn. yeah, I feel like that's something which honestly is the most fun part of poker to me, is like just like the often like the early stages of a heads up match where like you don't have the other guy worked out. And like obviously, the same in this challenge where there were a lot of people I didn't have worked out, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna like prod them all over the place. I'm just gonna test their game plan and like see where it bends, see where it breaks. Um, and then what like honestly, once you have the answers, it feels like you're just collecting. You're just collecting until they catch up. And yeah, and they work out how you were making money off them. But yeah, I kind of enjoy the process at the start where you're just sort of like throwing stuff at them and then seeing what they can deal with. And then yeah, I mean, like almost everyone is going to struggle in some way. Like, well, no, I say almost everyone. Everyone is going to struggle in some way. It's just up to you to notice what they're not able to deal with. Because yeah, like poker is just so hard, and like like in people's efforts to go after you, they're leaving their own weaknesses and all this stuff. So yeah, that's honestly the most exciting part for me. It feels like it's strange because like when I'm in the phase where I'm like kind of just printing EV, and I'm almost waiting for them to catch back up because I'm just settled into a rhythm against them, and I'm just like, well, this would be so much fun once they work out what's going on, and then we can move on to like the next layer of the meta. Yeah, and like I think with show tables that's happening like quite fast against like at least the top guys, that's happening quite quickly. And so like I enjoyed that real test of staying ahead of the counter punches, like because there were some times I remember where I hadn't even I hadn't seen that they were going to counter me yet, but I could feel it. Like I was really just like, no, this is the point where the guy is gonna like he's going to go the other way. And I was just like, I was feeling so confident, as, you are when you're running that well and like playing well. That I was just like, okay, no, yeah, we're going to go completely against type here. Like, I'm sure this is the one where he's fed up and he's going to range call me. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is the time where we just put the whole stack in very light for value. And then yeah, like I think especially when like those work out, it's just like, okay, yeah, I'm so in tune with like the rhythm and the game flow that this guy is playing at. And like that was something which like I hadn't really been that good at before in my career. I mean, it could also just be like playing very high on confidence and then like running well and then attributing it to skill. Like it's hard to say with these things, but it felt like I knew like the the pace that things were working at and could occasionally get ahead of it. Like sometimes someone gets to get one back at you before you realize that you're on a new level. But those hands where I was like, no, actually, this is the meta has changed, even though I have no evidence for it, and then it had, and that's like, that feels really, that really does help with the confidence as well. Yeah.
I remember in our last conversation, you said you've got a bit of a feel for how people will react, how player pools react. When you put someone into a certain node, how they're going to respond. You've got like that kind of intuitive nature to it. And it sounds like you're putting all these tests out and you're like, all right, give me the counter punch. Nope, not coming. All right, I'll keep hitting this one. And then when the counter punch comes, you're ready for that next level. You enjoy that kind of next layer of the game, next level of the meta, which you enjoy. Also, I think you mentioned earlier that you treated like 20 heads-up battles. I thought it was an interesting perspective because that makes it very dynamic. It makes every individual as someone who you're going at. How important was that mindset of kind of going after everyone individually rather than playing like a static game dynamic?
Yeah. No, I think it was like, that was like a lot of my EV in this. I think. Like, I remember. Actually, I don't want to give away someone's specific leaks, but I was talking to. Okay, yeah. I can just say in abstract, there was someone who like I was talking to after the challenge, and they were just like, I was just looking at the hands and I noticed you doing this. Am I really this out of line here? And I was like, yeah, you really are. It's not like, I was like, I'm not going to be, like, I didn't feel like I could even be subtle about it there. He's just like, really? So like, there was a spot where it's like, every time I raised him, I like raise called. There was never like, it was like I mean, if you look at, like there's one at Showdown after raise And then when that number is like the same as their call frequency, it means like they're just folding the bluffs, right? And he was just like, you had like 100% raise call in this spot, basically. Or like, I folded like once in a blue moon more than my bluff frequency. I was like, that could have just been various. I was like, yeah. Which is kind of funny that he gave away that he knew that of me. He just like, but yeah, we were just talking kind of openly, and I was like, yeah, no, I pretend there was, I pretend there was a decision, but yeah, like having those like, you know, really high confidence individual adjustment spots is like, yeah, I think it's like it's so important if you're gonna try to beat, like if you're gonna try to beat a small pool. It's like if I'm gonna do it and like you guys aren't gonna try this, then, or like you're at least not gonna try to keep up, then you're just at such a huge disadvantage. I think that, yeah, like I think some of the top guys knew this was the deal. And like also, you know, I say all this stuff, like a lot of the hands are just good poker, but but it's like, yeah, it's about like catching those ones where it's like generating enough EV that like every time you catch it is like really contributing to your win rate. And yeah, I think like a lot of people didn't really come in thinking about that. Just thinking about like the impact of turning some mix into like a 100% deviation, even if it's rare, which is kind of how I was trying to think about it. I was just like, I will mostly play well, and then I just want to make sure that if there's like a big EV swing, I don't let it pass me by. And yeah, like the way you find those big EV swings is by having like a specific understanding of the player you're up against, because like, you know, the pool as a whole, if you start to average them, is not giving you those big EV swings in any one given spot. Like if you look at someone like going bet free bet on the river, across the pool, I think we were probably doing like, you know, pretty reasonably on that in terms of value to bluff ratio. And then, yeah, also it can be more specific than that, because it's not even just the line. It will just be like, oh, there's a certain texture or whatever, or like, you know, there's something else which goes into it. And then if you have a very specific feel for someone, I mean, you can make quite a big deviation in those spots. That yeah, it's just like so win rate defining. To actually have that understanding of other people rather than just trying to play your game in a more insular manner.
How challenging was it keeping on top of all the exploits and game dynamics versus each player? I'm thinking myself, I played heads up. I'd often prepare for one opponent, play him for quite a while, play another one later that day. But you've got a lot of like 20 guys plus that you're playing throughout. How are you keeping on top of all those dynamics and those kind of metas of all those individual little battles that you're creating for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, like it can get a bit overwhelming at times. But it's more like what I was trying to do was make sure that I had really good instincts for the stuff. Like I'd open up the notes and I browse through them. But also, like, I'm playing like the same guys every day, you know. Like you've forgotten them a little bit at the start of a session, but you sort of like be like, oh yeah, this is the guy that's gonna try to beat me like this, and this. This is what I have to be ready for. And then yeah, and then it sort of refreshes what like because yeah, there was like a week break over Christmas, but it's mostly just, you know, wake up and we go again. So yeah, and as I said, like I wasn't trying to do this like super rigorous stats breakdown of people. It was more just like a feeling for how they think about the game. It was just like, oh, if someone thinks about the game like this, then this is the kind of spot they would really like to take as a bluff. And I have a reasonable catcher, and everything they've shown me about how they think about the game makes me think that they would take this spot. So then I call. And it's, you know, instead of having, because I feel like I look at some people's notes and like, I mean, obviously my notes were probably just very suited to me. I found something which works, but like some people will have like very, very specific things about like, okay, I was in like this line on like this texture and like, you know, some free bet pot cutoff versus big blind, and like he did this exact thing, and so the next time we get here, I'm gonna get him. And whereas I tried to just have it broke down to like, okay, I think when these sort of vague conditions are satisfied, it makes him more likely to bluff me. Just like, what about, you know, if I broke this hand down into something much more abstract, what was it actually setting them off here? Yeah, and once you like, I think once you have that, you can like have not seen a spot before. It can be some really rare spot, but you just get an intuition of being like, oh, this sort of like this weird thing which I think he might have been going after maybe applies here. And I think that's why I was feeling so confident in so many of my adjustments, because a lot of them were like, okay, yeah, I haven't seen the exact spot, but I kind of got a feeling that this is how the guy, like, yeah, this is the sort of spot which I would, you know, based on what I've previously seen, this guy would like. Yeah, and yeah, just yeah, like it sounds harder to keep track of than it is, because it's like, you know, the screen. If you thought to yourself like, okay, what are the personalities of my friends, right? You know, because they're like individual people, and you're not trying to like, your brain is suited to remembering things like that, like characteristics. If you try to remember like a whole table of numbers, your brain isn't suited to remembering that. So I think like the things that I was trying to remember are the kind of things which you can like easily recall, like when you see a screen name, right? Yeah, it's just and then also, because of the show tables, they would remind me that's what they like to do in other hands, because I'd be playing free tables and I'd be watching hands that I'm not in. Like, I intentionally play free tables so that I get a bit like bored and like treat every hand as like you know, as an important thing. So yeah, I'd be playing free tables and like I just see like you're just constantly getting reminders of being like, okay, yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to go after me in the same way, but like, oh, I've just seen him, you know, I've seen him do something like which I would expect him to do. Like, I see someone else in a bluff catching spot, and then I'm just like, I would really call here. And then even if they fold, and it's just like, oh yeah, no, he did have like he did have the bluff, and yeah, just constantly like, yeah, the instincts are just being like constantly trained.
Super interesting. Yeah, it's almost like you're creating a little character with all these kind of character traits and how they think, and really trying to get into an understand of how they act. I think I remember from the previous conversation, you talked about theories of learning and how you like to kind of put down what you think in advance. And then when the new information comes in, you're able to kind of stress test that. Was it right? Was it wrong? And it sticks better. And it feels like with all these players, you're kind of evolving your strategy against them. Either they're proving you are right. Yes, it's this guy plays this way. He's like, oh, he's moved it. He's deviated there. Okay, awesome. And counterpunch here, or get him back. So it sounds like this kind of very in tune with your pool, but you've created like something in your own mind where it makes it very easy to remember, or very fluid. And it felt like throughout the challenge, you felt in tune with that, a step ahead of that. I know you're a very competitive guy. We've mentioned it already. How much did the role of kind of ego, I'll use that term, play a role in terms of you wanting to win? I'm guessing other players weren't as hardcore wanting to win as you were. And yeah, how did you deal with that and channel that in the right way during the championships?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I felt like I had a lot more to prove than the other guys to some extent. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like someone like Linus, like whether he wins or he doesn't, he's got so many accolades. But yeah, I kind of felt, I kind of felt coming into this that I was like, okay, like, yeah, in a weird way, I wanted to be like, you know, no one knows how good I am. I wanna show how fucking good I am at this. Yeah, and so which was just very motivating for me. It did it. I feel like I kind of thrive under pressure, honestly. Yeah, it just makes me like, yeah, makes me just sharpen up. And does it? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say whether it would have got to me if things started going against me, because because I had a pretty smooth ride on it throughout. But yeah, I think generally putting pressure on myself tends to work. You know, I mean, we talked about like the nickname, or like screen name or whatever, and yeah, I think that yeah, I even tried to create artificial pressure on myself. So like having the actual pressure of competition like really gets me to sharpen up. Like, one thing I've noticed when I play tourneys, at least, is that being on the final table, like, yeah, that would be to some extent it would make me nervous, but I would also very consistently play my best poker on final tables. Which is just quite an asset. Like I can't speak to what to do if those situations make you nervous, because it's just not something I've had to deal with, you know. Like I just naturally tend to be excited to try and meet the challenge. So it's just a gift, I guess.
What is it about pressure that you thrive on? What sort of internal state are you experiencing? Does it sharpen your focus? Why is it spark something new?
Yeah, I feel like it's the fact that nothing is given. If you're playing in a tough game where, there was literally no prize for second place. And it's like, okay, I kind of have to go out and earn this. There's no like half measures to this. And also just like a general like outlook on things that I really don't want to have any excuses. It's like, if obviously like it's tempting to make them, and I catch myself doing it all the time, but I always feel like if I'm going after something, if there's some goal I'm pursuing, that I don't want to, I never want to be sat there at the end like, oh, I could have done it, but this. I always want to be like, okay, I literally gave this, I gave this everything, and if I didn't make it, here's what I could change, and here's what I could do better next time. And I think, just knowing that there's no room to, knowing there's no room to be like cocky about things and like let it just go. Because especially at the point when like Rigged was on some massive upswing, I remember just feeling like, okay, well, now I just have no choice except to play amazingly. Like there's just like there's no other option. If I don't, I'm gonna lose. And so it was kind of just a simple thing for me to process. I mean, it'd be hard to say why some people crumble under that. I mean, it's something I've had a lot of practice in, though. Like even from a young age, like I was playing chess at a young age, and I'd be trying to like doing the trials to get into the England team or like qualify for the trials or whatever, all that stuff. And it's like doing that at like 10 and 11 years old. And then also, having some success with it helped. But just really enjoying like, getting used to the process of like being like, nervous about something, especially when you're that age, but then like going in and being like, okay, it's still on me, right? Especially in a very deterministic game like chess, where it's just like, if you play well, you win. And then coming away and just, it is kind of a high in a sense. Like obviously you don't understand that at like 10 or 11 years old, but like there's like a thriller competition. I've always been very competitive my whole life. I'm like, competitive about everything. Like I can, like I scale it back now, but definitely like, it's just been always something, like playing sports or like board games or like werewolf or anything like that. I just really want to, I really want to win. And then say, well, if I want to win, I just have to play well. That's like, it's just very easy for my brain to process that.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So for you, like when you want to play well, you've got a lot of pressure on you. Is there anything you need to do to prime yourself or to prepare yourself to perform well? Or do you just hit a switch and you go into a certain frame of mind that allows you to perform? I'm saying this because obviously you play for 6 weeks, and to perform really well when you want to is not a given. And it's some players, I'm sure, throughout the challenge would have struggled. Obviously you had high confidence, came great results. How do you kind of lean towards high performance more frequently for yourself?
Well, I'd honestly say when the games are really tough, it is kind of effortless for me. When the games are softer, it's actually way harder for me to hit that level, because I'm aware that I have a buffer. If there's a fish at the table and it's just like, okay, well, like we have like a 5 BB like buffer, which the fish is like giving to everyone just for playing okay, and then like forcing myself to play like super sharp is harder, because I would often think it in terms of like a sort of binary way of like, oh, am I beating the game? It's like yes, and it's like but I think like as long as I can get into that mindset of like, okay, one of the ways I think about poker is actually so I remember having this came back from when I was doing like a philosophy degree, but I remember hearing about this idea of like like negative powers, like constitutions, which is like, okay, this is a big tangent, but it's like this idea from political philosophy that like a negative powers constitution is like, it just tells you all the things that you can't do, right? So it's like everything is good apart from like these things you can't do. And so, you know, as opposed to the other one, which will say like, these are all the things which you have a right to do. And then I was thinking, I often think about like poker in the same sense of being like, there is like a perfect way to play, and then everything else is like a negative powers version of that, where everything else is like a mistake below this perfect, you know, below this optimal way to play, given, you know, the info you have about the player you're up against, which, yeah, I said to people can make me really tilting to do hand reviews with. Because if you play a hand really well, I sort of just nod and go, yeah, nice, and then move on. Because if you make even like a small mistake, I'm really nitpicky. Because I'm just like, no, you had the info, like this line is underperforming, like you know, this is like, this is high confidence that you shouldn't be doing this against this guy. It's like, we got to do it sometimes. It's like, yeah, but anyway, but yeah, and I think like when I get into that mindset of like, this like perfectionist mindset where it's like I'm trying to keep my distance from perfect play as close to zero as possible, and not giving myself like, you know, not giving myself any excuses again of being like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, like this was bad given like what had gone on recently between us and what I know about this guy, and like, but you know, I only RNG'd it, so it's not, but like, I mean, obviously that makes it better than doing something pure, but just thinking to myself like, no, that was an opportunity missed. Like, even if it's only like a big blind or 2 big blinds adjustment, it's like, that's still like, that's still quite big when win rates are fragile, right? Like every single time you find like a 1BB adjustment, it's like amazing. So yeah, just trying to be in that headspace where like I'm not letting anything go, and I'm using like every piece of info I have available to me. That's what works for me personally.
How do you make sure you don't push that perfectionism too far? You mentioned like nitpicking everything, almost having like the perfect standards here, and anything below is kind of a mistake that you want to make sure you close that gap. How do you use that constructively with yourself to make sure you're not overly critical or maybe looking at too many things? Or how do you kind of channel that perfectionism to make sure it's always proactive without being too much for yourself?
Hmm. I feel like for me, because so one way that I'm kind of like easier on myself, because that's the way that I'm kind of being hard on myself. But one way that I'm easier on myself is that I'm not expecting, like, whilst I'm aiming for perfection, I'm not actually expecting to hit it. And then part of my process is just getting a little bit closer each time. So like, if there are mistakes, I always look at it as like, this is a mistake I made like now. And like, this is just part of the process of not making it again. And always looking at things through this very iterative mindset of, you know, if you're trying to get to perfection, like you kind of have to like chisel away to it. I there's this sculpture I really like actually, where it's like the like, so basically like there's like this guy who with a chisel who's carving himself. He's like, you know, made of marble, and like, yeah, he's carving himself out of the stone. And like this idea that, yeah, you get to, you know, you get to perfection like one like little tap of the chisel at a time. And like, I'm not there yet, and like maybe you never get there. In fact, you obviously won't. But like, just being like process oriented. And so yeah, it's kind of it's almost like cognitive dissonance, you know. But like you have to like, they're almost opposing views, but yeah, I mean, well, to be very cliched, it's like shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land among the stars, right? which is kind of how I think about it. I'm just like setting really high goals for myself, but I'm also with the knowledge that like the goals are like insane. So then if I don't meet them, it's more just like, okay, I'll come back the next day and be a little bit close.
Yeah, I like that balance of kind of shooting for the moon, but also being realistic that it's like a small step towards that rather than maybe landing at the final destination. So yeah, I think it's a a good way to balance that. But yeah, you said you set ridiculously high goals and don't often get there, but the goal last time on the podcast was to be number one, and a year and a half later, you're right
Yeah.
there. So yeah, it's amazing to see the journey you've went on and kind of the way you talk, but also like the confidence in yourself and how you back that up day to day. So yeah, amazing journey. Rene, I want to pass to you. How do you think about pressure for yourself? So Owen was talking a lot there about thriving under pressure, how he performs at his best, and playing in tough lineups. Give me that. I'm good to go. I don't need anything else. That's not the default. How do you respond, or have you noted other players responding to being in pressure scenarios?
So it really depends. Like pressure can come from many angles. I definitely think the more you feel like is on the line to lose, the more the pressure there is. Right? Is, for example, your identity is really tied to poker, or for example, you need to perform because you know you need to pay rent at the end of the month. These are like circumstances that make it harder for you to appreciate the pressure. So it's usually, I feel like, a reframing of the event itself. I wrote down actually that Owen said he feels excited, right? Where other people can feel like, oh, I'm nervous, and then kind of freak out about it. He feels the same sensations, but the sensation is like, oh, nice, I'm excited, let's go, you know? So I feel like a lot of it is the interpretation of the sensations that you have and kind of the label that you give it. Other than obviously, like I said, the circumstances in your life. Like I said, if it's financially very important for you to succeed, yeah, I can tell you already right now, you're most likely not going to succeed because it's just too important to you, and then you cannot enjoy the pressure. So, you know, it's also kind of the flow, the sweet spot, right? In terms of how much pressure you take on if you, and also like the confidence, right? If Owen is up against guys that are simply too good, you know, and he doesn't meet the skill level and he doesn't have the confidence, and you just get beat down all the time, yeah, you're not going to perform well. So you need to have kind of that sweet spot. You need, you know, where kind of the challenge is adequate to your skill level. It's not too easy, not too hard. That's also what Owen was describing, right? When there's a fish at the table, when the game is maybe a little bit, quote, quote, easier, it actually becomes harder for him. So it's really interesting because your mind kind of goes like, oh, this game is easier. This kind of the default response, but actually for Owen, it's harder. So he kind of has to no, wait, this is actually not easy. This is harder for me. So I actually have to pay attention, right? But it doesn't really come naturally. We talked a little bit about your day-to-day. I remember also from our last conversation, you were really big on like balance, right? You had certain hobbies. I remember music, fashion. You love to spend time with your friends, your social life. Throughout this 6-week period, did you go all in on like this challenge, or did you try to keep the balance?
Yeah, no, that was definitely balance in it. Yeah, I wasn't trying to burn myself out at all. Yeah, I met like a load of cool people around Vegas. And then yeah, I remember even like with a few days to go, I was at like a concert, just chilling with people, having a good time. You know, with Llama, and then some people, you know, they were his friends, but now I consider them mine, like some really cool people. And like we went skiing with like, can't remember how, I think there was like a week to go, and we were just like fuck it, we'll drive up to the mountains. It's only like 2.5 hours away. So yeah, we went skiing. So yeah, like, don't get me wrong, like I was focused on the challenge. And there were some things which got vetoed in favor of me just staying sharp and like being able to give my all to it. But yeah, I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be all my time, and I was also aware of the fact that I recover a lot quicker if I'm actually doing stuff which I enjoy outside of it. Like, I don't know if you've done many of those big leaderboard grinds in your career, but like I've always found like that if you end up playing like these super long sessions multiple days in a row, the recovery time is so long. Whereas if you're a bit more relaxed about it, and then you're playing like, you end up getting in like more total high quality hours. And especially like high quality hours were important to me because I was like, well, if I B game, what's even the point of playing? Like, you know, like maybe I can have like some win rate if I'm like playing some softer games or whatever. But I was just like, that's so pointless to just like, it's not like yeah, there's some big spot there who's making it worth showing up when you're not playing well, and then like increasing your recovery time exponentially by going past the point where you're exhausted. So yeah, it was just more important to me to just like stay fresh, like, you know, go out, have some fun, and then just come back to the table refreshed. And just make sure that make sure more that I'm like staying sharp over the long term than any particular, like, it's like, oh, like no fun until I play a 10-hour session today, or something. Like, nah, not really. Like, if I didn't feel like playing, I just wouldn't play. It's just I just wake up and see how I felt, and I'd just be like, okay, well, there'd be some days where I'd go on the stream with Owen, and he would just be like, "Are you gonna go play?" And I was like, "Nah." He's like, "Really? Are you competing?" I was like, "Yeah, but I'm tired." I'll just hang out with you for a bit, and then like I'll go like, you know, hang with Llama and some people later, and then I'll just come back tomorrow refreshed. And he was like, "Okay." He's kind of skeptical of my plan, but yeah. I just like, sorry, yeah.
Do any days stand out for you, like during the championship, that were either particularly good or maybe also particularly challenging? I think you had a pretty smooth ride, but does a day stand out where it was a bit more challenging for you?
I mean, most of the most stressful days were when I wasn't playing. Because I wouldn't be playing, and people would just send me pictures of rigged stacking people, and I would just be like, I'm trying to relax. Like, this is, you know, like, obviously they're not doing it from like they're doing it from like a good place. I like to think, at least, they weren't just doing it to torture me. But like, I would just be like, you know, there's plenty of time left, and it's like, whether he's stacking people or not, like, I need to get in this time to just chill. And but like when it's out of my control, it felt so much more stressful. And then and also, like, you know, deciding whether to play and all that stuff was so much more stressful. Like, once I was at the tables, I felt like very calm. Like, even if things were going against me, I was like, you know, I'd be getting stacked or whatever, but I would just be like, well, like, you know, c'est la vie. Which I guess is easy to do when you're on the upswing of a lifetime. You know, both in these games and in others. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't particularly stressed. I mean, like, you know, the go off was a pretty nice ride to the top. Like, some parts they feel like, you know, they feel rough while you're in them, but like then you know, like after a while it became a point where I could just zoom out and just be like, well, yeah, I'm clearly playing on top of my game. And yeah, I think as well, like at some point, it's also like, well, even if I get hit by like some really bad variants right now, I was like, well, I've played so well and I've made a bunch of money, and yeah, I was like, it would suck not to win the Rolex like this close, but I was like, you know, like, just still focus on like control what you can control and all that, and like not get too worried. Yeah, but again, easy to say when you're running well. Like, if I just got like kings into aces a bunch of times in a row, like, maybe, you know, maybe the stress would have started to hit. Like, or if Rig's upswing went like even further. But yeah, I don't know, for the most part, just like very relaxed.
You kind of already established sort of your own top 5 earlier in the conversation. Who besides that were you impressed by during the challenge that you maybe did not expect to be impressed by before the challenge started?
I mean, like, very early on, like, this is before he became like a serious contender. Very early on, I was talking to people about how much better Rigged had got. Like, I think like he might have been up there a bit. I think it was like, so there was like Top Up and Kevin at the top, and then like Linus maybe. I think those were the top 3, and there was like me, Rigged, and a few others who are like, I think like Top Up had 200k and we were sitting around 100 or something like that. I remember someone asking me like whether, I was just like, oh yeah, like, is Rigged like legit? And I was like, yeah, no, he's been like, I became very aware very quickly that, because we battled quite a bit on ACR. I was like, wait, some of the things that I was doing against him just aren't fucking working. And like, yeah, someone else was saying like the same thing. They were just like, oh yeah, I had I had reads on rigged, and it feels like he's read my reads on him. And yeah, he was definitely like, yeah, he was like playing really well, and like obviously, you know, confidence is really high, and like it helps you to stay in that place. Again, he's like pushing it right to the wire. I mean, I've talked about this quite a lot, how much Kevin impressed me. I didn't realize actually how good Kevin was gonna be. Like I'd always known he was like a high level player, but I really didn't realize just how sharp he was gonna be. Also like like Flushy came in as well, and I didn't know how good Flushy was gonna be, because it was like, I know he's played all these heads up battles, but obviously it's like, you know, heads up and six max are different games. Also, I was wondering how seriously he was going to take it, because it was quite small for him. But yeah, at first when he came in, I saw a lot of people just being like, "Oh, Flushy's such a punter. He's so spewy." And then I was just like, "Yeah, but like, he's spewing in a way I'm kind of, you know, I'm kind of behind it. Like, he might be a bit too much sometimes, but like, I was just like, no, I like really liked a lot of the stuff he was doing. Yeah, I was really impressed with what he was doing. Yeah, it's just like, and if this isn't even his main game, I don't know what the balance is for him, but I know he's played like tons of heads up battles versus like Barry and Linus and whoever. So I was gonna say, if this isn't even his main game, he must be like, he must be pretty fucking sharp.
Does anything stand out particularly that you were like, like a hand maybe that he played where you're like, wow, this guy knows his shit?
Oh yeah, no, I'm yeah, the exact hand where he like, cause it was one of those ones where like versus most people, I would have been like, okay, because it was on a non-show table, but it came up later on our review because I got owned. But like, I think versus most people, I would have been able to come away from it and feel like pretty good about the fold. But I remember against him, just like for like the rest of the session, just being like trying to get it out of my head, but being like, did he fuck me up there? It was like, so I can't remember the exact texture, but it was a 3-bet pot, and it was, I think it might have been like ace 7-4 rainbow, button versus big blind. I'm in the big blind. And I go like, I bet 10%. He calls, and then the turn's like, I think it's a deuce. I can't remember if it brings a backdoor flush draw or not. But anyway, the turn goes check. The river's a 10. We're 200 big blinds deep, by the way. There is a 10, and I go for a small overbet. It's like, I think it's 125% pot. And he rips, like just all in. And I was just seeing that I had an ace king. So, so we were fucking trapping, but not anymore. Like, yeah, I just remember sitting there and just being like very aware that I like didn't have a direction I wanted to go in the hand. Like being like, oh god, yeah, I'm just gonna have to RNG this one. Like, and then like, yeah, and then later on I found out he had 10-9, which is just a very sharply played hand. Yeah, he had like, yeah.
I was thinking like something like King 10 or something, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I also like, I remember looking back on it, and I don't think I realized this at the time. I had the perfect ace king to call, because I had the king same suit as the 10, so I'm unblocking king 10. And then I also had an ace which is blocking his ace 10 suited. So I think I had the ace king which is supposed to call, and I didn't. So, yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably not a pure call, but it's one of the higher mixes, and I think I was like kind of flustered by the line. Like it was one of those spots where like I really wasn't expecting to. Okay, like obviously I know jams are gonna come in there, but I kind of hadn't thought about it, because I was like, oh, if he jams, I'm gonna know what's going on. And then like I realized as he was tanking, I was just like, I don't know what to do if he jams here. Like I was just very yeah. I was aware that like, yeah, there's a chance a full stack goes in, like, well, like 2 stacks, I guess, because we're 200 big blinds deep, and I was like, I'm actually not gonna I'm not gonna have an adjustment ready here, like, and yeah, thinking that in advance, and then the stack went in, and I was like, well, yeah, we haven't come up with anything, so I ended up like tanking for ages, and like RNG, I fold, and yeah, later found out he gets me with the 10-9. I was really scared though before seeing what he had, because like 10-9 is just a really like sharp hand to have here, right? Like blocking ace 10 pocket tens. I was like really scared he was gonna have some like super fuck you hand, because like that was where I was at with him. I was like, okay, like he can do like, you know, he can play these really sharp like theory accurate bluffs and be very balanced with you, or like, you know, close enough to balance that it's hard to get a read even with the show tables, or he can just go fuck you and just like rip his pocket eights here, even though it's like a horrible bluff, but he's just like, this guy's gonna fucking fold. And so yeah, I remember having that feeling where I was just like, I could be getting full on range bluffed here. Like, but like I was just like, you can't just fear call someone for 200 bigs just in case they're trying to own you. Like, so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to handle it the best way I can. Yeah, I also remember as well a bit at the time, like, yeah, like playing like I was a bit B game, like I wasn't happy with how I played the hand really throughout. Well, not just the hand, but like also the session. I wasn't playing like super sharply during that session. And then that just being a standout moment where I was just like, oh, like I am the punching bag getting hit here and like not knowing what's going on. And it's like I much prefer being on the other side. This isn't as fun. Yeah. Well, I did get some back the other way, but yeah.
In our previous conversation, you talked about your game and that you often balance a thin line between brilliance and punting. Any moments of brilliance that stand out during this challenge, and also maybe any punt that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess we can go for another flushy hand. Although, actually, I mean, does Decky need a shout out? Yeah, Decky insists that I didn't own him in the challenge, when I think basically every hand that showed down, I owned him so fucking hard. Like, but yeah, okay, that was a fun. There's a fun spot versus Decky actually. I think so. I've been cut off. He's in the big blind. And it's like king 9-3 with a flush draw, just like single raise pot. I like pot the flop with like ace jack with the jack high backdoor. And I have the ace blocking the backdoor not flush draw as well, I think. And then the turns are 10. I have a pretty high frequency turn barrel, but not always. So it goes check check. And then the river's a king completing the flush. He checks to me, and my hand is basically supposed to be a pure bet. But I was just sat there like I don't think any chips are coming back to me if I go for this. Like I was thinking like I can like overbet to rep the flush, or like even like ace king, which pots then checks back. So nah, I don't really feel it, and I couldn't even put my finger on why. I just think Decky's fucking strong here. And I checked back and he had a flush. And I was like, yeah, that's I've got a pure bluff. I know it's a pure bluff, or it's like a 90% bluff or something. And I was like, well, yeah, I don't know. I just didn't feel like giving him my money. Like everything was screaming at me, just like don't bluff him here. And I was like, yeah. I just like not gonna take that one. Yeah. But yeah, it was funny. Like because me and Decky went over some hands afterwards. We're going over them with I think it was Sunny. And then he was just like showing me the solver output for it, and I was like, yeah, but you have a flush. Like, like you're telling me I'm supposed to bluff, but you have a flush. Like, why would I bluff if you're not folding? I think yeah, it was kind of funny because I think he thought just off of like because a lot of the when I do hand reviews, I mostly just talk about theory, right? I'm not going to give away like all the secret sauce, but I think he thought I was more of a robot than I was. And he was just like, "Oh, you missed this bluff." It's like, no. I knew I was supposed to. I just wasn't feeling it. Unlucky, man. And yeah, there were a few other spots as well where I just remember like, yeah, I had hands which were there was one spot where I was just like, oh, I'm supposed to like. I had a hand which was supposed to like mix folds, and I was like, but like, I could tell how excited you were to show off that you knew how to bluff this spot, so I range called you. And he was just like, what the fuck? He was just like, and he did the thing where he was like, I would go so thin for value here, and I was like, did you have value? It's just like, he's just telling like, you know, there's all this stuff on the board. He's just like there's a flush complete on the board. He's just like, I would have jammed straight, no sweat. Like, and I was just like, okay, yeah, but you didn't have a straight. You know, you had like this random like flare bluff that you wanted to, you know, you wanted to make the highlight reels, but unlucky.
From the opposite perspective, any big punt that stands out that you regret?
Big punts. Oh god, I mean, every fucking time I put a stack in against Munez. Big punts. God, see, I don't have the DB, but because it's just like not downloading, and it's all in Vegas. Some really bad hands I played. I don't know. Maybe I've just got selective memory. I just deleted.
I was
them.
gonna say this is a good sign, man. This is a good sign. If I
Yeah,
play
yeah,
an
it's a
average
good
session,
sign.
you ask me, hey, do you have any punts? I say, yeah, let's go over them, and I mark the copy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, what would be some really big puns? God, I mean, I got some hands where I made some small mistakes, but like nothing. I mean, okay, I'll talk about a Moon as well, where I just tried to bully him super hard, like, and it didn't go well, and he just, I'm pretty sure he range called me. So it's like button versus big blind, single raise pot, and board. It's like ace queen something. I'm gonna say ace queen 4 rainbow. Okay, I have queen 9. He checks to me. I pot the flop. This is like low frequency pot, but it's in there. Yeah. And then he calls. Turn is an ace. It's quite an interesting turn. There's supposed to be like some donking on it. You can donk this at pretty decent frequency. For quite small though. And then, yeah, he checks over to me. Well, I check back the queen 9 here, obviously. And then the river is a 2. Which is kind of an interesting card because like I'm gonna pot the flop very often with deuces, and then if like hit the backdoor boat here because it's not going to continue barreling when the board pairs and it can show down versus king jack king 10. So I do have that. Also, when the ace pairs, I do like there's a lot of slow playing from me, because like so much of my value range gets cut. Yeah, like there's just a bunch of checking back with boats here. And Munez is like B75, and I shove the queen 9, sort of figuring like the 9 is an unblocker to his gut shots. The queen's kind of whatever. He doesn't really have ace queen here, but so I mean like maybe I'd rather have a 4, but or like a river deuce even, but like those are, you know, those are pretty rare hands, and I was just like fuck it. I have pure unblockers, like have a lot of value here. I like to think I RNG'd. I might have just pure went for it. I'm just like I might have just been like, fuck it, this looks strong, Munez will fold. And like who tries to rep, they check back a boat here, right? And then it's like, yeah, so I went for it.
Here, you know?
Yeah, it's like, what do you even bluff here? Fuck it, bluff my hand. And then he tanks for a while and he calls ace 10. Which might seem like, okay, that's kind of top of range, but like when he goes B75 on the river, you kind of need to beat ace 8 for this, because I think like pot and then check back and then snap call you on river is like rough, like exactly ace 8, and then I have a bunch of hero calls. Like the queen 9 hand is like okay, so yeah, I looked this one up. Queen 9 is just supposed to be a pure call. It's not supposed to ever rip it in, but whatever. Like it's not like that big an EV mistake, and it's still higher EV than folding to shove queen 9. So yeah, like not too mad about that.
So your intuition says that he tanked a little bit, but he already knew he was calling. Yeah, in his head he was already playing a different hand. He said, well, let Owen sweat a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, because I think this is like a super rare spot, right? Like there's a very specific dynamic where like, you know, a lot of the time you'll have like a bunch of boats, but you're not supposed to slow play them. You're kind of, because my range would be quite polar, but like this is like a specific spot where I was like, okay, like the slow play is, you know, a very big part of my range. Like fuck it, we'll like ship it sometimes. Yeah, and I don't imagine it's a spot where he had like some specific exploit of like when Owen checks back a paired board and then shoves the river, he's full of shit. Like I don't think we've done that, like that's way too specific. But yeah, I just I went for it, and then yeah, I mean, I imagine he had to do some thinking. I think like I imagine he had to work himself up. Also, like sometimes Munez will tank and then call you, and he'll have like a absurdly snap call hand. I think he just likes to think everything through. Yeah, it's like like Munez is in the tank, and it's like, is he trying to like hero fold something, or like, does he actually have a mixed catcher, or am I actually, like what's going on? Like, is this the one where he goes fuck you and rage calls me?
I think it does show
yeah.
that at least, you think about things, that things are not standard. I think like at mid stakes, for example, you will see way more snap this, snap that. And
Yeah,
at high
yeah.
stakes, for example, that was actually something that I noticed when commenting and Kevin was playing. I mean, there were things that I thought were just 100% easy checkbacks on the river. And even there, he was thinking and thinking it through, So that seems like a characteristic that Munez also shared and that Kevin was also sharing. They think through spots quite really, even though on first glance they seem like, well, this is pretty standard, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially like, you have a spot like this, and if he calls, it's going to be a 200 big blind pot. Like, if you go, oh, my hand is 0 EV, I just have to mix. That's kind of you just like waving your hands and going, oh, I couldn't find any edge here. And like sometimes that will be the case. But
maybe he knows, okay, there's probably a call, but let me see if I can find an edge here.
Yeah. I mean, it also, you can just have your instinct of being like, okay, I'll just call like half the time or whatever, but can I do better than that? And you have your entire time bank to see if you can improve on that. And then if you can't, you can fall back on the RNG. And it's like, it's not the end of the world even if you end up falling back on the RNG most of the time. Like, a lot of these guys are really good players, and so then it's like, okay, well, that's just what it's what you're gonna have to do quite often. But there, if you find one time where you find a really good reason not to, that can generate a ton of edge. And so like spending the time just to check it, like even if you come away from it being like, okay, well, there was nothing to be had here. Like this is unfortunate. I'm just gonna have to play like theory.
Yeah, what are you gonna lose?
Yeah. It doesn't cost you anything. It's not like and also like the time banks are pretty like fast replenishing. You could leave the table to reset them as well. I mean, it's like, it's a rec battle as well. It's like, if there's like a fish at the table, then your time bank is kind of a limited resource, right? Because you can't like jump out and sit back in to reset it. So but like, there's essentially no opportunity cost to thinking for a hand. Yeah, and like if I'm ever coaching people and I just see them snapping their decisions constantly, I'm just like, why? Like, just play a little bit slower. You'll be surprised how much you notice. It's like, they're like, oh, I could never notice this when I show them something. It's like, have you even tried? Like, you have like all this time on the early streets as well to like pick up what's going on in the hand so that you don't have to suddenly do it on the river. Like, I think a lot of times what I see people do is they'll like snap through a hand and then they get into a big river spot. And now suddenly they start replaying the hand, and it's like, and they're trying to go through it like logically at this point. But it's like, you should have had most of this already done, and then you're just like putting the final, like finishing touches on it, or like making some value judgment. Like, you should have all the factors like sort of ready to go in your head by the time you get to the big spot. It's like, it's kind of what I was talking about with the flushy hand, where like, after I bet, I started realizing getting shoved on was a possibility. And I was already trying to work on what is my response if he does shove on me. So then it wasn't a surprise when he did. Obviously, that was a case where like I didn't have anything to go on. But yeah, it's like using the time that's allotted to you. It's like, if someone said like, oh, this is an exam you're taking, and you can either have 2 hours or 1 hour for it, everyone just like, oh, obviously take the 2 hours. But then, like, it comes to poker, we're playing for real money, and it's like, okay, yeah, you can either take 5 seconds or 15 seconds. I'm not saying, like, do this on every single fucking decision, but sometimes there are decisions which actually need some, like, they need a bit of thought. And then on river, it's like, you can take 20 seconds or you can take 40. And, like, yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll get to 20 seconds in and you'll be like, okay, this is clear, or like even 10 seconds, and it'll be really obvious, and that's no big deal. But like lots of the time, it's just like, this can't have been clear to you. Like there's enough to work through. So yeah, I think like, I mean, it's probably not like every single guy at the top, but like Linus is a big tanker, Davey's a big tanker, like Kevin we mentioned. Like, yeah, I like tend to take my time. Like, Llama's probably the quickest of the lot of us, but on river he'll like sit there and like, you know, like on river he'll sit there and like really use his time.
And to
Yeah,
be
I
fair,
think
he was
it's
last, right?
yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe he should use a bit more time. But yeah, I think most of the like, I say big tankers. It's not like we're like tanking simple decisions. Like so much is automated, but like when it gets complicated, we're not gonna. I mean, to some extent, I think it's kind of pain avoidance. People are just like the decision is causing them pain. Like it's very awkward for them to, to like it's stressful for them to work it out, and they kind of just want to bring that stress to an end. Like that's not what they would say they're doing, but I think to some extent that's part of that underlying motivation to act quickly. It's like, oh, if I just click call or I just click fold, I'll be out of this tough spot and I'll be into another one where I'm more confident about how to play it. But you've got to sit with that discomfort and then make the right decision anyway. Yeah, instead of just like, just running away from the
I
challenge.
think actually in the Sunny podcast, I believe he actually mentioned, I think, this exact thing, that always before a decision, he always sort of checks in emotionally in which state he is. And that's kind of what you're describing. If you're just rushing because you're trying to get away from an unpleasant feeling, right? Then maybe just first sit with the feeling like, okay, and just allow that feeling and then think about the hand, right? But often, like I can definitely relate with it. I've definitely rushed through hands and I was like, what the fuck just happened? And that was just me rushing through a certain emotion that I didn't want to be there, right? Also, in terms of what you mentioned, I guess, especially if on the Turner River something happens that, it's going to happen at a high frequency, then, thinking about that on the flop, that Turner River scenario is going to happen quite frequently. Maybe you should have thought about that before you steered the hand in that direction on the flop, right? It's like, how you're going to approach the spot is going to determine some of the EV of the line that you want to take on the flop. I'm curious, like, I think it was a pretty big success, so maybe we'll have a World Championship Part 2. How can you improve on this year's performance?
Yeah, I think there were, like I didn't come away from it with the feeling that I played perfectly at all. Like there were definitely, like, like a lot of the hands which I would think of as not punts, like some of which I'm thinking of, like, okay, this hand was not that bad, but I kind of made a reasonable play where I had like, I had the info I had to make a different one, and it's just mostly just a fine tuning. I was like pretty happy with my mindset, and most of what I was doing, but yeah, just like a few things of just like toning down the impulsiveness even even more so. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what I would change because it's like, it's always easier to pick out what you want to change if you're on a downswing, right? When you're on an upswing, it's just like, no, change nothing. Like, just keep it going. Like, let's keep the money rolling in. Yeah.
In terms of how you think the challenge is set up or how the challenge is run, because obviously, there was some urgency to it, right? I think it was GG removing high stakes and suddenly all the high stakes guys had nothing to do. And they were like, oh, the ideas of this challenge I remember already in the air, but I feel like they kind of fast forwarded, like, okay, let's launch it, let's go. Any things would you like to see change in the next championship, or maybe you guys have discussed that with the guys who have been playing? Any ideas of improvement?
So I think that I think the challenge should like trim down in terms of the number of players. So as in, like, you can start with the wide field and then just be like, after this, like, and it's like, okay, play as many hands as you want, whatever. After this date, we will take, like, say the top 6 players and they will play this many hands against each other, and it will be like scheduled, and they'll play, like, we'll find a time which people can make work. That might be difficult with 6 players. So maybe it would have to be less than that. Also, yeah, 6-max tables are like I much prefer playing 4-max or 3-max. So,
maybe that's an improvement. 4-max only. Fuck EP and MP, man. Just do cut off button, small by big blind. You have all the scenarios, no nit positions, nowhere to hide between tight ranges. Let's go.
yeah, I mean, like EP's so boring. Like, it's just so dry. It's just a cooler fest.
Did they actually consider this, or I remember
Yeah,
they
I mean,
were listening quite a lot to the players. It's some people pointed out like, hey, was there a reason why?
so we were talking about like. So one thing which got mentioned would be like getting down to the last two and doing a heads-up showdown, but obviously that's quite different because like everyone entered this as a 6-max reg, and like I play a lot of heads-up on the side, so obviously I'm down. And I'm sure if it had been like me versus Linus at the end, or like, you know, or if by some miracle Llama had been in there, then they would be like happy for like those guys would be happy to just be like, yeah, we'll play heads up at the end and put on a bit of a spectacle that way. But yeah, I mean like obviously Rick doesn't want to like he doesn't want to suddenly like switch over to a game type where like I've got a lot more experience than him. But yeah, I think having some sort of free-handed showdown, because we were like talking about doing something like that, but it was like Linus was in third and had kind of phoned in the challenge. I don't know, someone said he was like on holiday or something and he'd had it like booked. And also it was like we were like 20 or 30 buy-ins ahead. And so it's like, oh, we want to play free-handed with the top 3, but like, can you like you're just asking someone to make up numbers at that point? It's like if it had been me like Rigged and Kevin who were like playing down to the wire and then we're all really close, then like us being like, okay, we're gonna play like I don't know, we're gonna play like 3,000 hands free-handed or something to finish it off. I think that would have been quite like a cool way to do it, rather than yeah, I feel like yeah, the ending could be worked on a little bit. In terms of length of time, I was pretty happy with 3 weeks and then a break and then another 2. Like towards the end, I was getting like kind of tired, but
yeah, I feel like
I
a
was
feedback
thinking
that
more.
I've heard often is maybe shorten the period a little bit. They felt like 6 weeks of a, or maybe at least have that stage where you said, okay, everyone is welcome, sort of, and then we play until top 6. That's like the first 3 weeks, and then like this, okay, let's play 2 days of 6-handed, then 2 days of 4-handed, 2 days 3-handed, and then the competition is over, right? Something along those lines.
Yeah. I think something like that would be really cool. Just just to like round things out, and it gives it a bit more spectacle to it. But yeah, I mean like for me it was like for the first 3 weeks and then like the 1 week after the break, I was feeling like pretty good. Like towards the end of the 3 weeks, I was getting kind of tired, but whatever. And then it was only the last week where I was just like, wow, I'm having to really play a lot less. Just to like, I would like play one long day 5 tabling, and then the next day I'd just be like, I'm just not playing today. So yeah, it's like whereas before it was just like I would push myself with days like that, but as long as they weren't like common, I wasn't getting too burnt out. I do like, I do them here and there when I was feeling particularly sharp. But yeah, at the end I was just like, I played like a long session, and then I was just like the next day I was so out of it. So yeah, I would make it like a little bit shorter. Also, you want to increase like, you want to like the most exciting times are when like at least in my opinion is when there's multiple contenders. So like, the proportion of the event where like there's lots of people in contention is more exciting. Because I think at least for like the last day wasn't like it was a bit anticlimactic because like Rigged went on like a 15 buy-in downswing as I went on a 15 buy-in upswing or something at the end. And so then the last day was very much like, it was like it was just walking it in. But, I mean, obviously, you can't necessarily avoid that. Sort of the nature of cash games. But yeah, I think like making it a little bit shorter because like when people were getting out to a lead and then it was like if someone's off to a 15 buy-in lead early on, that's still very catchable for even the people who've made no money. Like, if you just like sat there breaking even, like someone's 15 buy-ins ahead of you, that's like, that's like 2 good sessions realistically. Like not good sessions, 2 like amazing sessions, but still. Whereas if you have like, once people start getting like 25 to 30 binds ahead of like not even just second place. Like once someone's at like 300k, if you're at 50k, it's like, well, how realistic is this really? So I think it can be a bit demotivating for people to keep the high volume, because at least in the first week, like the tables were literally running round the clock.
Yeah.
There'd maybe be like a 2 to 4 hour break tops in between, like, you know, in between like the EU sessions ending and like the American ones starting. But like, yeah, the American ones would go late into the night, and then like, you know, Linus and Kevin would come on at like, I think it's like 1 or 2 a.m. our time. Like, yeah, we just keep playing. I keep playing till like 4 or something, then go off and like wake up and Kevin's still playing. Just like say hello to him, like shift change. But yeah, I feel like that was, at least for me, the most exciting. You know, well, I would imagine as a spectator that would have been the most exciting part. You know, seeing Top Up get off to an early lead, and I guess you know, a bunch of people who following poker a lot more casually wouldn't have really known Top Up, and so then we'd just be like, oh wow, like, is this guy gonna be able to like hold off the lead against Linus? I think that was like, you know, that was very interesting to watch. Like, even when I wasn't like, you know, even when I was like more in the chasing pack than like right there at the top, it was like quite, you know, it was quite intriguing to see like, oh, is Linus gonna catch him? And then like, yeah, I remember like Linus went on like a massive downswing. He was like 2 binds behind Top Up, and then suddenly he was like break even the next day. And like, yeah, I thought that was like, yeah, I mean, like the long run is nice for actually declaring a king. Like the longer you do it, the more valid the results will be in that sense. But I think in the sense of like, you know, putting on a spectacle and like saying compelling to watch, something a little bit shorter would be a bit better in my opinion.
Yeah, and even still, then, right, the only way to really kind of look at what you say, who's the best. Yeah, we just look at like the last 3 years, like you said, right? Davey has been, you know, crushing these games for years with a very high win rate. So it's still, obviously, it's a reflection of at that moment who's currently at the peak, right? So we can make it 6 weeks, but you know, it like maybe if you make it a year, it will actually become like truly, you know, we can really establish that. But you know, I think if you do 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you know, it's not really gonna make a huge difference. As the champion now, right? You have a lot of people looking up to you, wanting to be like you. What advice would you give to low and mid stakes players who dream of competing in the next World Championship and maybe even win it? How can they beat you? That's basically what they want to know. What do they have to do?
Yeah, I mean, start now, I would say. I'd say one of the main mistakes I see people make is is actually asking people like me what the work is they need to do. Because I get so, like, on the stream, I see so many people ask this, and like they all think they're like, you know, obviously they haven't heard the answer a million times. So hopefully this gets it all out there, right? Hopefully this reaches a wide enough audience. But I think a lot of people want to know like the secret recipe for improving, but I only know what works for me. And I think what people need to embrace is just going out there and trying a bunch of different ways of learning, and then learning how you learn. And then once you know what works for you, you can then get more invested in that particular way of learning, rather than, like, a lot of times people would just be like, oh, Owen, how did you study? And I'll just be like, well, you know, I did like tons of in-depth like hand reviews where I'll just look at like, you know, one specific hand, go like really deep into the dynamics of it. You know, if someone brings up a spreadsheet in front of me, like, I run away in fear. So yeah, I'm not really big on the aggregate reports and all that, but it's like you got to try a bunch of stuff and then like see what is having a tangible impact on your win rate, like what is sticking in your brain, what do you feel like you're using in sessions, and you're just like, the more stuff you try, the more you will notice that these are the things which are actually helping me. Whereas I think loads of people, they want to know what work to do before they do it, but it's more like, do a bunch of work and then you will know which things to continue doing. Like, the time isn't wasted. If you try something and then it doesn't actually add anything, that feels like it's wasted time. Like if someone's done 100 total hours of study in their life and then they spend 5 hours working on something, it feels so significant. But like really, you spent those 5 hours learning that this isn't how you learn. And it will just, it will just fade out. Like as the time goes by, this will become like a very small part of your, like small but necessary part of your journey. To just eliminate, to eliminate all the things which aren't working. Like I mean, when I was learning heads up, I just played like millions of pounds against the trainer, and I was just like kind of just getting corrections and just like thinking about like, okay, why did I get this wrong and all this stuff, and like just developing an intuition like that. But there are some people who playing against the trainer just doesn't stick for them. I think they're like not critical enough about it. They kind of like, they kind of click through the hands very like quickly and like not they're not as engaged as they need to be in order to think about why it's gone wrong. And like you can still make tons of improvements even if you're not the person who learns really well from trainer. Like it's not necessary that you follow the same path as someone else. But yeah, I just say go out there and try a bunch of shit.
For you, future, and we see often, in various sports and other competitive environments, you have someone at the top and then at some point they fade away or they quit. Well, luckily in poker, you don't have like a physical limitation like in, for example, tennis, football, whatever, where at some point, you're just too old. That's probably not going to happen. So how do you plan on staying on the top? And, how does kind of the future for poker look like for you? You've been dabbling a lot of heads up. Is that something that you want to pursue more? I heard you briefly mention MTTs as well, maybe live poker. Where's the future going for Owen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, well, I certainly have a bunch of free time now. This challenge is over. I'm probably gonna play some heads up for a bit. There's some people that want the smoke, so we're gonna have to go fight, see who comes out on top. See how far I can push that. I mean, I'm probably gonna have to make it to a Triton at some point. Like, what what am I doing? Not going to one realistically. That'll be exciting. I'm not really much of a long-term planner though. It's funny actually. You're saying about like staying on top of your game. I sort of realized after the challenge, like I could see how people get washed up because I was feeling so confident in my like, feel for how things are going. And like, as I said, I kind of swore off solvers a bit. I was like, oh, this is what happens. You get to a point where you're so confident in like your feel for the game that it's just like, what's even the point of studying now? I just gotta stay sharp and like lock in. And then, and then like, it's like I got a brief glimpse into my future. I was like, oh yeah, like a few years down the line, this will this will come back to bite me if I don't do any periods of studying. Like, what, I should probably get to it eventually. But yeah, for now, all good. Usually, also what it takes is a downswing to kick you into shape. Like, I don't know if that's it for you, but like you lose a bit of money and it's like, okay, right, back to the Sims.
For sure.
Yeah.
Adam, any final questions you would like to Owen before we let him go?
No, I think we covered the journey quite well there. So I just want to congratulate you, Owen, for an amazing series or tournament championships. I know the last conversation we had, it was a kind of dream of yours to be number one, and you've got that top of the hill, at least for this brief moment in time. So great job on that. And yeah, we thank you for coming on to share your journey.
Great conversation. Thanks again, Owen, for coming on second time. Actually the first guest that came on twice on our podcast. Adam, any main takeaways of our conversation we had with Owen?
Yeah, quite a few. I found his mindset coming into the challenge very interesting. I thought we talked about treating everyone like a heads-up opponent, almost like 20 heads-up battles at once. He mentioned almost like this predator mindset of wanting to win, wanting to go to war, and really trying to treat every opponent as an individual and where he can exploit those. I'm sure anyone listening could see Owen as a confident guy. He backs himself, but he also backs it up with the work he puts in. It feels like for him to go out on top of this challenge, one, he really wanted it and he put the intensity in, but also he seemed to have a slightly different approach to many Six Max regulars who probably had a more holistic approach of how to play the pool, where he was like, attack everyone, go at everyone, and really trying to create carnage in the player pool. He also mentioned how he how he remembers how to play against players. He kind of creates a character of them, how they look. He mentioned like it's easy to remember what your friends do because you know their character traits, their attitudes, and he's always stress testing how are they thinking. He's trying to think what they would think and then basically put them in different scenarios. I also liked how he talked about testing people. He mentioned this in the first podcast as well, which I liked. He's always like probing people and going, right, do you know the exploit for this? Do you know I'm getting you here? If you don't, I'm just going to keep attacking you. If you do, awesome, we can move on to the next game. And if not, and he even mentioned getting bored at times because people weren't keeping up. He's like, come on, I'm getting you here. Can we go to the next level? All right, cool. I'll just boringly take your money off you in this department if that's the case. I like his competitive drive as well, which you talked about. He wanted to win. Like, this is the thing. He just signed up. He's like, I want to win. He mentions, I wanted to show people how good I am. People underestimate me. I want to show them I'm a top guy. So yeah, so many things that I felt came to a nice conclusion. This whole challenge for him, based on the previous conversation a year and a half ago. And then just one final thing, how he handles pressure. He mentions he loves it and he thrives under any sort of pressure. So you put him in a high stakes environment like this against the best players in the world. He doesn't really need routine. He doesn't really need much performance habits. It's just show up, give me tough opponents, and I'm locked in. And that's you see this with some high performers who just the pressure of competition is enough to lock them in. He mentioned playing chess as a youngster. That kind of trained him to handle nerves, handle adrenaline, handle pressure. And now he's just put him in the big games and he can perform well, which suited this format really, really well. And yeah, really pleased that he did so well. How about yourself, Rene? What was the main takeaways?
I actually want to add something to that. Like, it was not that he didn't really prepare because he does really know himself pretty well, right? It's more based on feeling. He kind of sees how he feels. I think he manages himself pretty well, and he's trying to make sure that the volume that he does put in is A-game volume. Like, also, if you look at the amount of hands played in the challenge, he was probably average in volume, not a very high volume, not very low volume, which I think was kind of more his style, right? He said he plays 3 tables. He was always on the lookout for more information. Actually, a quote of Sun Tzu, Art of War, that came to my mind. The battle is won before it's fought is a very big one of him. And that's kind of where the preparation came in, right? He already knew the strategy that was going to work against these players, right? And it was very individual. So the preparation is kind of the battle is won before it's fought. And then when he came in, all he had to do was execute. And that's then also in the beginning, I think he said the first 5 days, he didn't really get off to the start that he wanted, but he did see that the plan that he had was actually working. So despite the actual result maybe not coming his way, he was very confident because he saw that what he planned out to do, the plan was working, right? He just needed to catch some heat, as he was saying. I think he mentioned, do you know how to deal with this? I really like that one. And he said, listen, this is a little frequency play, but until you show me that you know how to deal with this, I'm gonna up the frequency a little bit or lower the frequency a little bit based on what kind of the evidence that you give me. Always be on the lookout for more. I think that was definitely also something that a lot of players just show up and play their game, and people think that they should do all the work before they start playing. And we just covered, right? Preparation is important. Go in with your strategy, but then people are like, okay, now I'm just grinding. But for him, this was just the beginning, right? You sit down, you're going to play, and now you're going to look for more. What more adjustments can I make? How can I make even more money at this table? For him, that's only where the game begins. It's just like his baseline preparation that he does, but from there, the game begins. And the last point that I wrote down, that he really wanted everyone to hear, that there's no one way to get there, right? Everyone always wants to know, how did you get there? What should I do? And he said, like, yeah, find out what works for you. He mentioned that, especially in Heads Up, he played lots against a trainer, worked a lot for him. In 6 Max, he would go very deep into specific hands and hand histories, and that's kind of how he learned. But he said it can be different for other people, right? And in poker, there's many ways you can improve, and people have different approaches. And he said, listen, just put some time and effort into one approach and reflect and see if this is the best for you, and then switch to a different approach that maybe works better for you. So, yeah, I mean, always great to have Owen on. I've listened a lot to his conversations when he was on the Coinpoker channel, when they were streaming the World Championship. Great stuff. Definitely go check that out. I want to thank Owen again for coming on. I want to thank Adam for co-hosting this podcast. I want to thank our audience for tuning in. If you are interested in maybe competing in the next World Championship and you need some help, you can reach out to me and Adam in our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. If you liked this podcast, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Got a new episode dropping in 2 weeks with Mr. Absolute Top Up, so make sure you don't miss that one. Shout out to our sponsor, GTO Wizard, Coinpoker, and I will see you guys in the next episode.